This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 18th, 2022 South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. All commissioners are present this evening. If you'd all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to turn this over to Chief Dorney for a moment.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. If everybody would please join me in a quick moment of silence in recognition of National Police Officers Memorial Day to honor those who have served and given their lives in the line of duty. And just give a few minutes, moments of silence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Dorney. Moving on the agenda, all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded, filed, and posted to our township website for public access. Randy, if you would please read the public virtual meeting rules this evening.
Sure. Courtesy of the floor for non-agenda items will be at the beginning and end of tonight's agenda. For all listed agenda items, the board president will call for courtesy of the floor prior to the Board of Commissioners taking action on that specific agenda item. Comments are to be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand to be recognized, then move to the podium when directed. You will be asked to state your name and address for the record and may then proceed with asking your question. For those participating virtually this evening, please keep your microphones or telephones on mute to avoid any background noise that may cause interference with tonight's meeting. The chat box feature will be active through the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address into the chat box. The staff member monitoring GoToMeeting will then unmute your microphone, and you will then have the opportunity to comment or ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I'd like to announce that the Board of Commissioners did meet in executive session on May 16th to discuss personnel matters. Announcement D, we have a recognition this evening. South Whitehall Township is very fortunate to have 4 volunteer fire companies that serve our township. And tonight we have the honor of recognizing the Greenwald's Fire Company for their 100th anniversary. Very exciting milestone. So if I could please invite you up to the front of the podium. Wonderful. Thank you all for being here tonight. We do have a proclamation prepared that I'd like to read aloud. The South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners would like to take this time to celebrate with Greenwald's Fire Rescue this incredible milestone of 100 years of service to the residents and businesses of South Whitehall Township. As a 100% volunteer fire department comprised of approximately 75 active members, your general fire suppression skills, as well as rescue operations within the confines of the 17.1 square miles of South Whitehall Township are second to none. You are a valued and integral part of our community. We honor you, the men and women of Greenwald's Fire Rescue, for all you do. Thank you and happy 100th anniversary. Congratulations. And I would invite the board to please step down with the members. We'd like to take a photograph to commemorate this wonderful event. Randy and Chief Dorney, if you would join us.
I went to Shanghai one time when I was the plant manager at Geo. It was actually too.
Thank you for indulging us that moment to take a photograph. Moving on to agenda item 4 is courtesy of the floor. It's opportunity for public comment on non-agenda items. Before I open the floor to the public, we do have an honored guest here that's visiting us. We have Mayor Turek from Allentown coming to visit. Please approach, and we would love to welcome you to our township. Thank you.
We'll definitely stick to the 5 minutes. So my name is Matt Turk, stating for the record, address is 46 South 16th Street in Allentown. But I'm just coming by I wanted to do a few things tonight. One is just introduce myself, be a good neighbor and say hello. I'm the new guy over in Allentown. I wanted to just take the opportunity to say who I am and introduce myself to some members of the board that I might not know. But just take the opportunity to come before you in a public setting and say hi and say the new administration in Allentown. We're very excited to get a fresh start in the city and excited to be a good neighbor. And part of that is coming in and saying hello at events like this. And it's a pleasure to see beautiful chambers that you have here and an awesome crowd, and it looks awesome. I've been taking the opportunity to go visit with some of our other neighbors, including I was in Salisbury Township last week. I was in Bethlehem City a few weeks ago. I want to apologize. I think I was originally scheduled to be here a month ago. I'm glad I didn't come because I ended up testing positive for COVID the next day. So that would have been a problem for everybody. But so in addition to saying hello, I also want to take the opportunity to be a good neighbor and welcome you all to visit Allentown as often as possible. We know that we're thrilled to have great neighbors like the residents of South Whitehall Township enjoying the many great things that we have in the city of Allentown. But I wanted to do two other things. One is to thank the administration in South Whitehall Township, and especially Chief Dorney, for working with us in the city of Allentown on a regional issue that we all face, which is the problem of illegal operation of dirt bikes in the city of Allentown, but really across the Lehigh Valley. And we asked members of our neighboring law enforcement bodies and our neighbors' administrations to work with us to develop solutions to this problem that we all face. We're thrilled to have Chief Dorney participate in our regional dirt bike task force meetings. Those will continue to occur as we try to work with our own administrations and with legislators to identify solutions to those challenges. So first, say thank you, but second, ask that you all as a board continue to support the staff here at South Whitehall Township in continuing to engage in those regional issues. As Commissioner Osborne knows, I worked for the Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation for years prior to becoming the mayor of Allentown, and got a solid dose of regionalism when I was there. And what I understand, and I'm confident that the members of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners understands, is that we don't live in islands in the Lehigh Valley. We do share a lot of the same issues. We share a lot of the same awesome things too. A lot of the great things about the Lehigh Valley are common to all of us. So I want to encourage the administration of South Whitehall Township and the leadership in South Whitehall Township to continue to participate with us as we identify additional regional challenges, but also to continue to enjoy all of the great things that we have in Allentown. I'll continue to enjoy many of the great things that that you all have in South Whitehall Township. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I appreciate it, and I do look forward to seeing you down the road, either in Allentown or here in South Whitehall or any part of the Lehigh Valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Turek.
Appreciate it.
We do appreciate your kind words, and we look forward to continuing to build on our relationship with you. So thank you, and please continue to reach out anytime. Appreciate it. Thank you. Moving on to courtesy of the floor. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak? Sure. Come on forward, sir, and please give your name and address at the podium.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Pohl. My address is 1415 Frederick Street, Allentown, PA 18104. I know you're looking at me thinking, oh no, not this guy again. Why? Because the protection of my family and the community are the hill I'm willing to perish on. My previous police complaint involved being stopped less than 100 yards from where my granddaughters resided for 5 years and had just moved within the last 6 months. 5 years of playing in the park, walking through the neighborhood, riding bikes. We were pulled over for being suspicious on a bright, sunny Sunday afternoon, learning to drive in the neighborhood that they were familiar with. The officer was parked by Greenwald's fire station. He observed us drive by and waited till we were driving by the complainant's address to stop us. The reason for the stop, I believe, is a misinterpretation of the Terry rule and subsequent rulings for traffic stops. South Whitehall Township Police, from patrolman to chief, have told me they believe any citizen can make a phone call to the police, provide their correct name and address, and claim any person or vehicle is suspicious without claim of any specific criminal activity or reason for their belief, imbues the police with carte blanche to stop, interrogate, and detain anyone. As one officer explained a year ago, with Allentown parks closed due to COVID, those people are now coming to our parks. What people? Basketball players, spectators, unlicensed food and drink sellers? Who are those people? The upshot of this complaint was, excuse me, the captain who told me he was in charge, the final authority for police complaints, was, Mr. Pohl, if you don't agree with my decision in this matter, get a lawyer and sue us. At least he had the courage of his conviction to repeat his statement to Chief Dorney, as there was no recordings to prove or disprove any claim anyone would make. Chief Dorney appeared nonplussed by the statement, and the captain is no longer in the chain of command when it comes to complaints. Regarding my most recent complaint, at first I was offered the opportunity to view the body cam footage. Then I was told I was forbidden from viewing the body cam footage because I was involved in the incident. Later, I was told maybe I could see the footage after the case was resolved. Chief Dorney instructed me that a Freedom of Information request under the right to know law is null and void. He is 100% correct. What he either doesn't know or forgot to mention is I have a perfect right under Act 22 of 2017 of the Law Enforcement Recording Act if I do so within 60 days of the recordings being made. At this point, I'm left with only two possible conclusions. Either my neighbor and neighbors lied to the officer and launched him like a guided missile at the most likely underage black teenager, which would lead me to believe that South Whitehall Township Police passively abets racist behavior by their citizens. Or we have an officer who is temperamentally incapable of the vast power and responsibility we have bestowed upon him by giving him a gun and a badge. We have seen the outcome of someone not up to the challenges. A dead unarmed black man. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during courtesy of the floor this evening? Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll move on. We have item number 5, meeting minutes. We have the May 4th, 2022 meeting minutes in our packet. Are there any questions from any of the board members? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I need a motion to approve said meeting minutes. I'll second that. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. There are no presentations this evening. On to agenda item 7, ordinances. We have several ordinances that are a little bit similar. The first is a permission to advertise an ordinance reenacting, amending, and restating Chapter 144, Article 4, Building Code of the codified ordinances of South Whitehall Township in its entirety and adopting provisions of the 2018 edition of the International Building Code as the Building Code of South Whitehall Township, and as part of the Municipal Building Code of South Whitehall Township, repealer, no effect on pending suits or proceedings, severability, effective date. John France, our building code official, can you present this item for us this evening?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Commissioners.
Thank you.
With this ordinance and the following two, B and C on the ordinances, a lot of what I have to say is the same. February 14th of this year, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania adopted the 2018 versions of the International Code Council construction codes. We have no choice in that. That's the codes in effect in the Commonwealth. Because of that, in 3 of the codes, the first one being the building code in this on the agenda, the second one being the International Residential Code, and the third one being the International Plumbing Code, there are things that need to be filled in, either technical data or names, South Whitehall Township, for instance. So every time the Commonwealth adopts a new version of the codes, we have to go through the process of doing these ordinances to fill in the blanks on those sections. If someone wants to know what the snow load is for a building, they need to look at our ordinance, what our local climatic data shows. That is basically the gist of all 3 ordinances. The first one being the International Building Code, which applies to commercial buildings throughout the Commonwealth.
Very good, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the board members on this agenda item?
I will say, if you have questions on the whereas clauses, I will respectively defer to Attorney Zader in that regard. That's not my strong suit.
Very good, thank you. Of course, Commissioner Hodges.
Yeah, I have a quick question, John. Maybe you could clarify this for me. When there is a violation of the code, what is the process of correcting that violation, and who enforces it?
Okay, what type of violation, such as an inspection violation?
I'm sorry,
Okay.
any type of violation. I just wanted to know the process.
Okay.
We see a violation, then
Okay.
who gets notified? What's the process that
Very
we go
good.
about to fix it?
I can give you an example. I was doing an inspection last week at one of the warehouses in the township, and the fire alarm system had some things that did not meet the code when we did the inspection. What I'm obligated, and what all inspectors, either myself or the third-party inspectors that we utilize, and this is commercial or residential, it doesn't matter. What we're obligated to do is tell them what the violation is. We're also obligated to tell them where in the code, what code section we're citing. That we're not always asked to do that. For instance, in the violations that I pointed out, I did not provide that. I could have, but they did not ask for that. And at times they do. And quite honestly, at times I've been wrong. And we look at the code and like, holy cow, you're right. If they don't fix a violation, many things can happen. The inspection doesn't pass. We don't issue a certificate of occupancy. The last thing we want to do, but have the legal recourse to do, is eventually take someone to a citation process to the district magistrate. On building code issues, I can't remember doing that in 27 years. Plan review, if we get a plan in and it is deficient in any way, we have to write a letter, certified letter, to the applicant explaining what the problem is, and there we do cite the code section that applies and give them a chance to respond to correct the plans and then resubmit them to determine code compliance. Does that answer your question adequately? You're welcome.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Any from the public? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I need a motion to give permission to advertise said ordinance.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I will read the next ordinance. As you explained, John, it is very similar, but it's permission to advertise an ordinance reenacting, amending, and restating Chapter 144, Article 6, Residential Code of the Codified Ordinances of South Whitehall Township in its entirety, and adopting provisions of the 2018 edition of the International Residential Code as the Residential Code of South Whitehall Township, and as part of the Municipal Building Code of South Whitehall Township. Repealer, no effect on pending suits or proceedings, severability, effective date. Once again, John.
And
is
as I
anything you need to
explained,
add?
yep, this deals with the International Residential Code. The International Residential Code applies to 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes. Layman's terms, single homes, twin homes, and townhomes, and their accessory structures. I would point out there was a significant change in the code, in the table, one of the tables in the code where there was a lot of new information that needed to be provided. We did reach out to Barry Isett and Associates, the residential inspectors, to provide that technical information.
Are there any questions on this matter from the board? Any from the public? Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion for permission to advertise said ordinance?
I make a motion.
I'll second that. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. On to the next, we have permission to advertise an ordinance reenacting, amending, and restating Chapter 144, Article 1, Plumbing Code of the Codified Ordinances of South Whitehall Township in its entirety, and adopting provisions of the 2018 edition of the International Plumbing Code as the Plumbing Code of South Whitehall Township, and as part of the Municipal Building Code of South Whitehall Township. Repealer, no effect on pending suits or proceedings, severability, effective date.
It says the plumbing code. Please be aware that this applies to only commercial structures, commercial buildings. The residential code, which you have just adopted, applies to the building, HVAC, plumbing, everything in residential. The commercial codes are different. The commercial codes are separate. So this plumbing code applies to commercial plumbing within the township.
Thank you. Were there any significant changes on this one, John?
No. I failed to mention, one of the things I do when I do this is if the code is reorganized and the code sections change, I change the code sections to correspond with how they changed in the code. Probably the hardest thing to do.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions from the board on this ordinance? Any from the public? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion for permission to advertise said ordinance?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. Item D, we have permission to advertise an ordinance reenacting, amending, and restating Chapter 144, Article 8, Property Maintenance Code of the Codified Ordinances of South Whitehall Township in its entirety, and adopting provisions of the 2018 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code with local amendments, providing for the South Whitehall Township Building Code Appeals Board to serve as the Board of Appeals, providing that state law controls where requirements are in excess of this ordinance, and providing for a repealer, continuation, and saving clause, severability, and effective date. Tom Harper, our code enforcement manager, you're going to help us with this one?
Yes,
Thank you.
basically following off of what John said, it's pretty much the same with this code. The property maintenance code is the main code that code enforcement uses to enforce violations in the township. It deals with high grass and weeds, accumulation of trash and debris, unsightly things on the property, deteriorated conditions at properties, whether it be windows, doors, et cetera, interior, exterior. It's both used for commercial and residential. In this ordinance here, you'll see that there are the same things where it's kind of fill in the blank that the municipality is allowed to do, put in the things they want, like we put in the 12 inches as our height for grass. We put in the time frame for the heating season where you have to supply heat to the tenant. And also there's a section in here regarding what the penalties will be if you're in violation and citations are issued, et cetera. It does follow the principles where, you go out, you look at the violation. From there, you can either talk to the person or you can give them a notice of violation, follow the steps that are outlined in the ordinance, in this ordinance, in the international code. And ultimately, if there's non-compliance, then you need to take the person to the magistrate's office.
Very good. Thank you, Tom.
Mhm.
Are there any questions from the board on this ordinance? Any from the public? Nothing. Hearing and seeing none. Do I have a motion to proceed with permission to advertise said ordinance? I'll make that motion. We have a second. Motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. We're moving on to agenda item 8, resolutions. We have a resolution granting preliminary final approval to a minor plan entitled 1420 North 22nd Street. And our Director of Community Development, Dave Manhart, is presenting.
We need to move the table up a little bit. So 1420 North 22nd Street is an application to subdivide the property. There's an existing building on one of the properties. The subdivision will create a vacant lot for another building. This was approved or recommended for approval by the Planning Commission in November of 2020. The applicant then came to the Board of Commissioners, to the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners. There was a sidewalk deferral. They came to the Board of Commissioners asking for that deferral to be a waiver. That was denied, so they moved forward with the deferral. That was the last time we heard from them. They've given us extensions, so now they're here for approval. The list of agency comments are all comments similar to prior to plan recording. These comments have to be addressed. And it's pretty straightforward from there. With that, I can hand it over to the applicant if there's any questions regarding the project.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. Is the applicant here? Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joe Renko. I'm the engineer who's here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Kardashian. Just a quick summary. I mean, that was a good summary that you just heard, but it's the property is about 20,000 square feet. It's located at the southwest corner of North 22nd and Grove Street. Mr. Kardashian, he lives in the house that's there right now, and what he'd like to do is subdivide a small 7,000-ish square foot lot for possibly building a home for his son down the road. So at this point, we have some comments still from the township engineer that we have to work through, and we just would request that they're conditions of the approval, but we're confident that we could address them.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board on this resolution? I'll just ask, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay, Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that our township engineer is comfortable with the presentation.
Yes, this has been, as the engineer stated, this has been around for a good amount of time. The remaining comments, there's, I believe, 8 total, very small, very minimal, drafting issues and some things that have to address through the township at addresses, things like that. But at this point, we are comfortable moving this forward. And all these items that are still remaining would need to be addressed prior to recording. So although you have the opportunity to give a conditional approval, all these will be addressed regardless.
And the applicant has no objection to fulfilling them. That's what I thought I heard.
Yes, correct.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Has the acceptance of conditions form been received?
Yes, it has.
Thank you.
I have a question for our engineer as well. In your letter on, there's a statement that the township should consider the acceptability of the existing driveway width. It's approximately 52 feet, while the maximum allowable driveway is 20 feet in our saldo. Is that something that has been discussed and has been resolved?
At this point, the driveway, it's up to you if you would ask them to remove the portion of the driveway. But right now, what happens is there's an existing driveway in front of a garage with an extra width that was used at one time, I guess, to pull another vehicle next to the house. We do not see an issue engineering wise to have the extra apron width at this point. We defer to your judgment, the board's judgment, but we, as an engineering comment, we do not have any issues with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any concerns from the Community Development Department on that particular item?
No, I believe the zoning officer viewed it as a lawful pre-existing nonconformity.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Any from the public on this matter? Okay, then I need a motion to approve the resolution granting preliminary final approval to a minor plan entitled 1420 North 22nd Street.
So moved.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
Have a good evening.
good evening.
Moving on to Resolution B, we have a resolution amending Resolution 2020-18, which granted conditional preliminary final approval to a major subdivision entitled KRE Springview Commercial 2 to address a condition required for a saldo waiver. And our Community Development Department Director, Dave Manhart, present.
So this is KRE2. We've heard a lot from them recently. They received an extension, actually a couple of extensions this year. The big outstanding item was related to the public safety's comments regarding a no turn on red from Citronia Road to Broadway, so going north on Citronia. That traffic light and that decision is a PennDOT under PennDOT jurisdiction. We went back and forth with the Public Safety Committee, ended up writing a letter to the Director of Engineering for PennDOT District 5, requesting that that condition be reconsidered. They came back saying no again, because the traffic counts don't warrant the no turn on red. So that was PennDOT's position. The applicant then went back to the Public Safety Committee to review the conditions of the letter from PennDOT to discuss any changes or any other conditions that they might be agreeable to remove that condition from the resolution. So that condition is part of a saldo waiver. So the waiver is the distance of a driveway from an intersection. So based on that distance, public safety deems that that's a pretty unsafe condition, and the no turn on red is a way to make it safer. In the memo from the Public Safety Committee dated, have it here somewhere, recently, they voted to keep the condition in. So the applicant is aware of this. The applicant has requested that they appear before the board to refresh everybody's memory on the condition and what they deem is an appropriate measure for that intersection. Considering that there's new board members and they figured it'd be worth appearing here at the board to review where they're at with it. So with that, I can hand it over to the applicant.
Thank you, David.
Good evening. I'm Ed Murphy. I'm counsel to KRE. With me tonight is Noah Krismer, who is the entitlements director from KRE, which I think most of you may be familiar. And Dave's summary is indeed accurate. We had two purposes for wanting to bring the board up to date tonight. One was recognizing that some of the new faces on the board weren't present when the process went forward and when we obtained our approval in January of 2020. And also, secondly, and perhaps maybe more relevant, is to share with you some new information we have developed since our last appearance before the Public Safety Committee. As background, Dave alluded to the fact that this one condition that we've been discussing for the better part of 2 years has been an issue that we've been working collaboratively and cooperatively with the township to try to satisfy. We've gone as a unified front to PennDOT to ask that they agree to the no turn on red at Citronia and Broadway. And as Dave reported, PennDOT to date has been unwilling to do that. So Dave's also right. Noah and I met with your Public Safety Committee most recently this spring, and absent some support from PennDOT, the Public Safety Commission was unwilling to modify the condition in the waiver. So we're still working. We still want to try to get to where everybody wants us to be. So we thought we would, one, update you on the plan, how that condition arrived in the first place, and then two, share with you some information that we've developed, but which we, in fairness, have yet to share with the Public Safety Committee, and you can decide whether or not you want us to or not. But I think I'd turn it over to Noah and let him bring everybody up to date. We have some visuals and a little bit of a video as well of the intersection that we're happy to share with you as you deem appropriate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. So I'm Noah Krismer. I'm Director of Planning at KRE. And Ed's right. So this plan was approved in January of 2020. We have this condition that everybody has talked about. And I think the real focus has been on left-hand turns coming out of the Broadway driveway there. If you've driven past the site, the two driveways are constructed there. This is the driveway on Broadway that comes out. And I think that the condition most folks have been concerned about is folks making a left-hand turn out of there, because that left-hand turn that wants to go southbound on Citronia gets backed up, and there could be an unsafe condition if cars were sitting out in Broadway waiting to try to nudge their way into that line while cars were coming northbound on Citronia and turning right to go east on Broadway there. So we've recognized that that's a condition. We've tried to work with Chief and the Public Safety Commission to do a whole bunch of different things. We had like a don't block the box striping. PennDOT said no to that. No right on red. PennDOT said no to that. And we've done all of that in partnership with the township. What we developed, the new information that Ed is talking about that we developed, was we decided that one thing we hadn't done was fly a drone and see what the actual traffic conditions are there. And so we went out and we flew a drone during the lunchtime and the PM peak hours. And we chose a school day, and we made sure school was in session. And we're now sort of very late in the pandemic. I think had we done this a year and a half ago, the data might not have been that supportable, because everybody was at home, in 2020. That's no longer the case. The parking lot at the shopping mall is full. Our apartments are full down the road. So we shot this drone video and had a couple other little slides made up on the site distances. And I think what it proved out, and what we'd like to show you guys, and again, I think Ed's point is well taken about the Public Safety Commission and whether or not they would like to review this as well in some more detail. What it proved out is that the condition is actually not that dangerous at all. In fact, the right-hand turn on Broadway is somewhat of an acute angle. We see cars going almost to a complete stop. I told Chief if he wanted to get his ticket quota in for a month, he could sit there and get people for slow rolling that stoplight. But they come to almost a complete stop, and then it's an acute turn. And you've got cars coming maybe 5 miles an hour with well enough time to react were somebody out there. We also found that, and our traffic engineer will walk you through this if in fact the board wants to see this tonight, we also found that the queue, the lineup to go left, to go on Citronia, is not as far back as some folks may sort of have in their mind, or as it might be on the off sort of night. In fact, it does back up, and it backs up beyond where this intersection comes out, but it generally clears during a cycle of the light. And our traffic engineer will remind you that as part of the approved plans, we're also extending that protected left to go down on Citronia. So I think we found that on a combination of very important factors, you're going to have good sight lines, you're going to have cars going at slow speed, and we're going to the left-hand turn going south on Citronia already clears on almost every cycle and will clear better once we institute some of these improvements. So we thought we would show you that tonight, because sometimes the drone footage is very interesting every time we do it, and it's just something that we've only started to do recently, frankly, on a lot of different projects. And it just sort of, traffic is one thing that folks have perceptions about, and when those perceptions generally grow because traffic is frustrating. When you look at it from a drone footage, it doesn't lie. So we took this throughout all of the PM peak. We sent Tony all of the footage. So the clips that we're going to show, we're not going to show an hour and a half of clips. We have a couple clips, but we sent all the footage to Tony just so he could make sure that what in fact we were showing was representative, that we weren't cherry picking, a particularly good sequence of the light there. And just to wrap up, we also did want, as Ed started, to show some of the new commissioners here the plan that was approved, because a few of you weren't sitting on the board throughout this entire process. There was a changeover at the board, so thought you all might benefit just from seeing what it is. And so that's where we're at. And if the board wants to act this evening, that would be great. If the board would think that the Public Safety Commission should have the benefit of reviewing this video data and chief reviewing the video data, that also, we're here to, obviously what we want is to try to lease the site, and we feel this is very important for that. It's been a really tough slog trying to get that site leased. As you can tell, we have no takers. But we're here also to respect the community and to give you guys the benefit of the drone footage and whatever else, and the same with Public Safety Commission. So if it means coming back out to public safety and then back to you guys, we'll do that as well. So that's where I'll leave it.
Thank you.
And I'll take any questions if you guys have them. I'm not the star of the show. So
I do have a question.
Oh, please.
Since I sat on this for years,
Yes.
listening to this.
Yes.
This topic has been going on for, as you said, many, many years.
Yes.
I sat on public safety for years.
Yes.
But now I'm up here.
Yes.
I would suggest,
Yes.
I can't speak for the other four commissioners, but even if you showed it tonight to us, it should still go to public safety for viewing.
We sort of thought
No matter
that,
what.
We sort of
Okay.
thought that might be the
Okay,
case.
that's what I can't speak for the other four members here, but I would think that public safety should have that opportunity to see it, before this board makes a decision on it. You said that you did the drone footage.
Yes.
And you sent, we're not going to see an hour and a half
Right.
of a day. How many days did you do that?
We did one day.
Only one day.
One day during the week. And it's generally how traffic counts are done. Traffic counts
What
are
day of the week was it?
data. I think it was a Wednesday. Wednesday.
Thanks.
Yeah. And by the way, we thought that might be responsible. We've just gotten so many extensions. We didn't want to do a disservice to this board. We wanted to show up and be ready to do it, because you guys
I'm not saying
you've
they're
been
not gonna see
gracious
it.
with your extensions.
I still think public safety should see it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm going to agree with Commissioner Kennedy on that and extend my comments a little bit on his first point.
Yeah.
I think we should always go to public safety and get their advice before coming to this board. I just think that's a standard practice that we should have.
Yep.
So that we're ensured that we're, doing our proper due diligence in order to have appropriate public safety. And I'll attach to that. I have a personal goal, which I've shared with others. We need to elevate the respect we give to our Public Safety Commission compared to what has existed in the past. If I just state it in absolute terms, we must have the absolute respect for our Public Safety Commission going forward. And I would encourage the board to always consider their input. And on this subject, they have a lot of input. I mean, in the package here, there's probably, over 2-3 years, there's at least 8 meeting minutes. So that's my one comment. My other one, I'll try to do this short. I appreciate the fact that you're bringing more detailed information.
Yes.
I'm going to try to paraphrase what I said at the last time, the big picture. Last time, I called this the trifecta of safety concessions. And I described what the trifecta was. The first one is this driveway is not in compliance with SALDO. It doesn't meet the minimum distance, from the driveway to the next street, which is Citronia Road. Yep. And the second of the three is we have the Public Safety Commission saying repeatedly, thankfully, I appreciate the fact they've been consistent, that they did not want a left turn allowed out of that driveway, right? So that's the second thing. The condition allows a left turn, but then it states this condition.
Yes.
Right? And now we go to the third item, which is the condition, and now we're not meeting the condition. So to just say it in short, we're not meeting the minimum distance, we're not following public safety, and we're not following the condition that they asked to have in place. That's the way I look at it in the big picture, and put it all together, it's very concerning. I'm open-minded and take a look at drone footage or whatever.
Yep.
I prefer after public safety sees it. But I'm not sure any details are going to satisfy this overall safety concern.
We just ask that you be open-minded, and we appreciate that. And we appreciate the continued consideration. And I think it hasn't been for lack of hustle that we haven't been able to meet that condition that you all put in there. We've certainly tried our very best with PennDOT, as we know that Dave and his team have as well.
I just had a question if Greg or Dave could just refresh for there are new board members here. So the distance that is required in Saldo for that driveway and what is presented in this plan. Do you have those numbers?
I believe the distance required is 300 feet. I'm not exactly sure what the distance presented is.
Yeah, Mark can. So approximately 150 feet. And we can, after we go to public, it seems like you all would like us to go back to public safety. We get that and will. And after that, we can have actual testimony from Mark about we can revise the testimony.
That's fine. I just wanted a little baseline for the new members as well.
And just so you know, that's not, we didn't arbitrarily choose 150. That's the end of the property. So the lot is a narrow lot. We would push it farther back if we could.
Understood.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Yes, Commissioner Hodges.
I certainly empathize with your situation. I'm very familiar with this intersection. My daughter lives in Upper Mac, so I travel this almost daily.
Yep.
You're in a tough spot. I understand that, but I do feel we should uphold public safety and their recommendations. I would like to see this go back to public safety. And I'm also thinking long-term. St. Luke's is going to be building a hospital, a short-term care hospital there, orthopedics, I think it is. So you're going to have more traffic generated from that as well. So I respect the fact that you did the drone study.
Yep.
And I'm open to viewing that. But in the future, there's going to be that more construction and there's going to be more traffic and it's going to further congest that intersection. And, you're just in a really tough spot. But yeah, I think we should go back to public safety.
Good.
Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you. Noah, I just have a question. In your presentation this evening, is there any change in the design that you originally came to this board with? Or are you just saying that you have more data?
More the latter. And the plan over the past couple of years has changed quite a bit as we've tried to massage sight lines and do striping and other signage. But by and large, not so much of a design change, more wanted to give everybody the benefit of the drone footage and our thinking on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree with Commissioner Hodges. I mean, when I listen to these difficult situations, I always try to think in my mind, is there a solution?
Right.
In good conscience, if you were to say, well, there's no further information and we want you to make a decision, I could not approve it. Mm-hmm. That intersection in and of itself is difficult. And then Tillman Street and Citronia just complicates that whole configuration there.
Yep.
But I do agree. I think it's fair. that you go back to Public Safety Commission and present the information you'd like to. For me, that's necessary.
Yep.
I also have a question for our solicitor. Solicitor Zader, this property, and I don't know the full background, although I was here and the last time you were before the board, I was sitting on that side. But I have this question. Is this potentially a situation, I don't want to assume the answer, but is this potentially a situation where the constrictions, let's say, or restrictions are so onerous that this becomes an unusable property and the property owner has a different case? Do you know what I'm asking?
I do. And I think the best way I can answer that, Commissioner Osborne, will be this way. Had that question been asked and had that been a case presented by the applicant back at the time the initial plan approval was being considered, that's one where I think we all would need to put on our thinking caps and address it and think about it. At present, and not with an intent to prejudice the case being presented by the applicant, but we have an approved plan by which the conditions have been accepted by the applicant.
Okay.
So with that being the case, the applicant is bound, unless the board would see fit based upon what's presented, to change its prior decision and somehow come to an arrangement that's mutually acceptable to both the board and to the applicant.
Okay, great, thank you. I know that there's, that possibility exists in a very difficult property, and I just wanted to make sure that that's not going to be potentially anyway a topic that we're going to need to be addressing down the road.
Again, without prejudicing myself, we've not thought about it that way, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah.
So the goal then, it sounds to me like we've got to try to find a solution that's acceptable to even
That's
your
right.
own company.
Yeah, correct. Or, and I say this respectfully, or change perception based on things like drone footage and accident reports. I think, we could probably work with Chief. It's my understanding, just in conversation, that PJ Wheelahands is not the source of accidents there, and that driveway exit onto Broadway is far worse than this. There is absolutely a blind spot there, but it hasn't led to accidents. So I think that we would hope to, I think we'll go back to Public Safety Commission, but I think we'd hope to maybe put some of those things together and then see if when we come back to you all, either Public Safety has a different idea or a different perception of it, or you guys do.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So sorry. I guess.
Everybody's made comments that are very similar to comments that I would have had. I certainly do concur that this should go back to the Public Safety Committee. One question I did have, though, and I thank Commissioner Hodges for bringing up the topic of St. Luke's developing the short stay facility that they'll have in that parking lot, pretty much as your neighbor. Have you given any consideration to working with them to somehow make an exit that would come out through their property and through their signalized entrance so that there wouldn't be a need to even explore this further where there is?
Yes, and we looked at that back, I think maybe 2.5 years ago. The grade between our property and theirs and the outfall structure for the stormwater basin is going to make it nearly impossible for us to get cars, much less a sidewalk, which is extended down there. There's just not enough space, and the grade is too steep to get it realistically back up there.
Thank you.
Yep. And we will take another look at it because I appreciate that. Yeah.
Sure. And I concur with Commissioner Hodges' comment as well. Traffic only increases over time as more development comes in, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Public Safety has to say about this, but it's certainly a very challenging site, and I know that their recommendation was to only have a right turn out of there to just eliminate that potential conflict. So
right.
I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to say.
Good.
Any other questions from the board? Any from the public?
I think Mark and Rob are going to be kicking me that I caused them not to have dinner with their families tonight. Sorry, guys.
So at this point, so we do have this as an agenda item, so we will, I believe, take a motion to table at this point since no decision will be made by the board.
And I apologize if you don't mind if I ask, do we know when the next Public Safety Commission meeting is?
The first Monday of the month. So
First Monday. Okay. Thanks.
So we need a motion to table this item.
Motion to table.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
See you guys. Okay. See you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item C, we have a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, approving and authorizing the execution and delivery of an intergovernmental cooperation agreement with Upper Macungie Township titled Sanitary Sewer Service Agreement. And our Public Works Manager, Herb Bender, who would please present for us this evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. The reason for this agreement is to remove the sewer main from the Tillman Street Bridge over the Turnpike. This agreement is between South Whitehall Township and Upper Macungie to allow the sewer to flow into the existing Upper Macungie line located at Bellflower Way. And the reason we'd like to do this is so we don't have the suspended sewer line on the new Tillman Street Bridge, which would force us to go to a forced main instead of gravity fed. And it is a big savings in price with being able to take this route than staying on and have to put grinders and pumps in and everything like that. So we need this agreement. We'll also have an agreement with LCA after this. We would have to move 10,000 gallons of allocation to LCA because it's going to end up in their trunk line. So we have to provide the allocation for that. And we are working right now with PennDOT to get the HOP to make the crossing from Lincoln Tech and for the Turnpike Station to come across Tillman Street to go into the gravity line. And then we would be looking to hook up the 3 customers that are out there right now that are on that line already.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board on this resolution?
I have one, Herb, 3 customers right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens in the future if more are added, and will that increase the capacity to Upper Macungie? It would.
We are built out there.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah, we can't go any. The only thing that could happen is Lincoln Tech could look to maybe do something in that zoning area that might be a little more, but we can regulate that due to the allocation that would be out there. We're looking at an average of around 3,500 a day, 10,000 peak. So that's why we have to move 10,000 gallons of allocation.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
And for the board's information too, Upper Macungie did have this on a recent agenda, which was approved.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Sure, Commissioner Hodges.
Herb, this was the one that has to be done by October, right? This one has to be done fairly quickly.
Yes, they would like us, they have come back, they had some other snags, so they're giving us till March, but they would still like to see us off by the end of the year now. So we are moving pretty quickly on this to try to get that to happen this year.
And I had a question as well. On page 3 under intergovernmental cooperation, I'm not sure if this is you or a solicitor question. Item B said the duration of the term of the agreement shall be an initial 5-year term with a possible 5-year renewal. Is this going to need to be renewed every 5 years? Does that apply to this?
Yeah, and if I understand it correctly, Joe, the reason it is in there is in case we would have to move more flow out there. But I don't see a need for it. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe that the 5-year term is something that Upper Macungie wanted to have in there, but Herb is right in what he said. And in addition, I'll just say that when Herb and I collaborated on this particular issue, should there be any kind of problem in the future with respect to that 5-year term, I mean, ultimately, DEP is the trump card in this. And they're not going to allow for residents to go unserved because of an agreement arguably expiring.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions from any of the board members? Any from the public? Okay, hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township authorizing the execution and delivery of an intergovernmental cooperation agreement with Upper Macungie Township titled Sanitary Sewer Service Agreement. I'll second that motion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you very much, Herb. Moving on to motions, agenda item 9A, we have a motion requesting permission to proceed with the Jordan Creek Greenway Design and Engineering Services Supplement Number 4, Phase 1 Amendment for TASA Grant and River Road Design Options. Our Parks and Rec Manager, Mike Kukitz, could you please present this item for us this evening?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. As I believe you're all aware, South Whitehall Township recently received $1 million in TASA funding to complete the construction of the Jordan Creek Greenway Trail through Cover Bridge Park. This project will require additional engineering services to meet PennDOT specifications prior to going out to bid. And staff has also followed up on a request from the Board of Commissioners to look at possible alternatives to the initial proposed shared road section of the Jordan Creek Greenway Trail as it goes through Cover Bridge Park. There's 4 potential design options that have come out from the various meetings that we've had leading up to this point. And at this point, staff is seeking permission to award Jordan Creek Greenway Design and Engineering Services Supplement Number 4, Phase 1, Amendment for TASA Grant and River Road Design Options to Michael Baker International in the amount of $35,360.
Thank you, Mike. Before we get into the questions from the board, I just had a simple question. I know we're talking about a grant that we received. It was $1 million, and we're taking the funding for this action this evening from the capital budget. Is the engineering fees not included in the grant monies?
No, they are not.
So anything that we're paying to Michael Baker is coming from our funds and not part of the grant. The grant is just for the actual construction of the greenway.
For the initial soft cost. So this actually, the first portion of the funding that you see here, the 24,000, that was actually brought before the board, I want to say about 4 to 6 weeks ago. And that was tabled at the time when Phase 2 was awarded. That was tabled to make sure that the TASA funding did come through, which it has. So that has already been in front of the board. That was expected, I'll say, and budgeted for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any questions from the board on this matter? Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you. Yeah. Mike, first of all, thank you for keeping this moving. The scope of work for Michael Baker, you mentioned 4 different options that were discussed.
Mm-hmm.
So is their scope of work to include developing each one of those 4?
Yes.
Okay. And when they do that, then the board will see the presentation about those 4 options?
Correct.
And then we will need or be asked to make a decision about which option we may want?
You are correct.
Okay.
Yeah. If you look towards the end of the packet, you'll see Michael on page with Michael Baker letterhead, and it lays out kind of the 4 options that we're looking at. There was even more options than this discussed. This is kind of what we've narrowed it down to. One option being widening River Road in that section to allow for more room for a trail and cars. Number 2 would be to build a wall between the creek and the road to essentially put in fill and keep the trail off the road on the south side of the guide rail. Option number 3 would be to construct a bridge alongside of the guide rail. Again, on the south side of the guide rail over the Jordan Creek, more or less, but staying on the north side of the creek. And then option number 4 would be to just simply implement as many safety measures as we can with the current proposed layout.
Okay. And each one of them will come with a cost estimate for implementation?
Correct, yes. What we're looking for is the expectation of what it's going to cost for construction, the timeline as well, which will weigh in with the potential TASA grant. We have till August of 23 to go out for bid with the TASA funding. That's part of their regulations with that. And also just the design and permitting cost to kind of put that together.
And will it be followed up with a recommendation?
I believe that we will make a recommendation to this board.
Okay.
Ultimately, it will be up to the 5 of you to kind of converse on the options that we get and
Okay, thank you. And that last part is important to me because when you lay out 4 options, 4 different costs, 4 different scopes of work,
Yeah.
and say, see what you think,
Yeah.
you're going to come back with nothing.
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, so if you can kind of channel us to where to look.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I had a question as well. I know that if some of these options may require additional funding, is there a process through which we can begin now as a township to begin exploring funding avenues for some of these outside of township funds, be it grants or looking at, I know there's an awful lot of money for infrastructure and modalities and transportation at both the local, state, and federal level. Is there a way that we can, in tandem with Michael Baker preparing these, also be looking to augment some of these options with outside funding when it's presented to the board?
It gets a little tricky, and obviously time plays into it. There are some current options through DCD. I believe one ends in May and one ends in June, I believe. The trickiest part about that is that we don't have the design cost, the construction cost at this point. So we'd virtually be asking them, hey, this might cost $500,000 or $1.5 million more. Can you put some money aside for us in a grant to it? So we're not quite shovel ready with it. And that would be a difficult application to write, I would say.
And is there an avenue outside of going through a state agency? So for example, either Lehigh County or state of Pennsylvania, or even the federal government that might have programs in line that
Sure,
maybe
yeah.
aren't necessarily grant writing, but.
Yeah, once we get these options and as a team we decide what we're going to pursue, I can definitely look to try to find additional funding if necessary at that point. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think this may be a good time for us to reach out to our legislators too, to see if they have any ideas and avenues for us to explore.
I think that would be a great idea. Yeah, if that's something you can do. Any other board questions? Anything from the public? So at this time, I need a motion to proceed with requesting permission to proceed with the Jordan Creek Greenway Design and Engineering Services Supplement Number 4, Phase 1, Amendment for TASA Grant and River Road Design Options. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Moving on to agenda item B, we have a motion to approve budgetary transfers, and we are going to ask our Township Fire Commissioner, Chris Kiskaravich, to please help us with this agenda item.
Good evening, Commissioners. We're looking at historically on fire hose purchases for South Whitehall Township. They have been made in the past out of the contingency account. This has been this way for the past several years. It was not a budgeted line item in the past. As such, there is not a budgeted expense for the hose in 2022, although we do have a need for hose replacement. This will be a separate line item in our 2023 budget. Additionally, Citronia Fire Company's bathroom project that was not completed in 21 had not been added to the 2022 budget as a capital expense. What we're requesting is permission to expend funds for hose purchase of $20,000 and funds for $43,000 for the Citronia bathroom project, for a total expenditure of hose and bathroom consists of $63,000. Both items are not currently budgeted. As such, we're requesting that the board grant us permission for the fire companies to spend this money. Because the fire fund is not a major fund, this is permissible. We will use $63,000 from the fiscal stability fund account to the fire checking account to allow for the additional reserves in cash to make these purchases for these expenses. And as of April 28th, 2022, we did have a $100,298.87 in the fire fiscal stability account.
Very good. Thank you for that. Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Hodges.
I do have a question. Are these expenses, can they be covered by ARPA funds that we have?
When we put in for ARPA funds, we did get ARPA funding to replace some air packs
Right.
and do the air pack purchase. We, at that point, have not put anything additional in for ARPA money at this point.
Yeah, without any major changes to the current 22 budget, that ARPA money has already been allocated for the current year. So we would be talking about next year. But from my understanding, from what the fire companies and from what Chris has communicated to me, the need for hose and the cash for the bathroom project is this year. So
I just have a question. Maybe I'm reading this incorrectly. Budget line item, it says, we will use 63,000 from the fiscal stability bank account to the fire checking account. And below that, as of April 28th, we have 100,000 in the fire fiscal stability fund.
Correct.
The first, are we taking it from the general fiscal stability fund? The first one is still the fire stability fund.
All of these monies are within the fire fund.
Okay, so the wording on fire stability on the first one should be there.
Correct.
Not fiscal.
Yep, correct.
Okay.
Not general fund.
It's not
Yes.
our fiscal stability fund.
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yep.
Thanks.
So after this, there'll be, roughly $37,000 left in that account.
Right, okay.
Commissioner Kennedy, I had that same question as I'm reading this. But Chris, I think, clarified it in words without really referring directly to how it was worded in our package.
I agree. We should change that wording in there. So it's not in, it doesn't say fiscal stability bank account. It should say fire fiscal
Stability
Right,
Fund.
and then the same thing in the line below it where it says fire fiscal stability account. So it's consistent.
Say that fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even say it slow.
I do have a question on the fire fiscal stability fund. Is that those monies, is that what's left over from the prior year, or do we yearly make a contribution from the township budget, or does that have to do with the fire tax? How do we establish that fund?
That's a good question. So historically, the fire fiscal stability bank account has had, since the inception of the fire fund, has had roughly a $50,000 contribution made every year. So the apparatus fund is funded in a similar manner, and both of those have been funded after the fact, like at the end of the budget process, each fall. This year, as we're identifying how we want the budget to look, and as we're changing the process for the township budget overall, we want to upfront be able to fund both the apparatus fund and the fire fiscal stability account as well right away, so that those monies are immediately set aside as a separate budgeted line item. So that's not, at the end of the year, we only have $30,000 to put aside or something of that nature.
So do you recommend that this is something that the fire subcommittee should be discussing pre-budget season, or is this going to get dealt with in the township's processing of our budget as a whole?
I'm not sure if it's so much of an either or as it is a both and. So like in about 2 weeks, everybody's going to get an email of how the budget process is going to start. So we're very much almost in the preseason of the budget. So, but I would have these conversations at the committee level as well as during the budget meetings.
Okay, so Commissioner Kennedy serves with me on the fire subcommittee. So would you agree with me that we would add that to our agenda for our
We could add
next
it
meeting?
to, I have already been touching base with the fire chiefs of each department, and I have already gone out and already spoken with the Woodlawn Fire Company with Chief Search and started talking about their needs and what we're looking at towards next year's budget and working on next year's budget. Because like Scott had referred to, we're looking at changing the way the budget's set up and how the line items are set up to make sure we're addressing all the appropriate needs out of the appropriate funds for the future. So we can absolutely put that on our agenda for subcommittee, but I have already been starting to preliminarily get with the fire companies and start touching base with them on what their needs are going to be for next year and how we want that budget to look and working towards that.
Great. My other question is, obviously fire hose is something we probably buy on a fairly routine basis, as well as gear for the fire companies. Are there grants that we can apply for those type of ongoing, more basic necessities of our different fire companies as a township or each department to kind of help us offset? some of
Yes,
these
now I
costs?
know like certain, right now with the way Greenwalls did their Safer Grant program, their Safer Grant program is taking care of the purchase of gear for them. So as they bring in new firefighters under that Safer Grant, that grant has covered the cost of gear. Right now, it's about $3,000 or so to get a set of gear for a firefighter. Right now, I believe, I know like Chief Search has taken money out of his, out of the, what am I saying, Manley? The Relief Association. Thank you. I know Chief Search has gotten money from the Relief Association as far as purchasing gear, and I know he's keeping very good track of who's actually active and non-active, and reallocating that gear as need be. And that's going to be an ongoing battle with gear. It's at some point, if it's going to get very expensive to be able to cover every nut and bolt that a fire company needs without looking for multiple ways of attacking it. And like you said, looking for some grant money. I'm not aware of anybody that's getting hose on grants unless they're getting like a very large order possibly. But what we're seeing is annually in testing a hose, they test hose annually and they'll pressure test it. And when hose fails, we replace it. We've also ran into some incidents over this past year and a half, 2 years, where we've had damaged hose at fire scenes. Some of it depending on what the incident is. We could recover that possibly, like with a spill incident, we could possibly recover that from the insurance. And we're continuing to go after that type of stuff. But then there's sometimes hose just gets damaged from use, and it's kind of like a cost of doing business commodity.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from the board on this request? Anything from the public? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Do we have a motion to approve budgetary transfers? I'll second that motion. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you,
Thank
Commissioners.
you very much. Okay, agenda item C, we have a motion to proceed with adoption of the entire civil service eligibility list for patrol officer in the South Whitehall Township Police Department. And our police chief, Glenn Dorney, if you would please present this item.
Yes, thank you, President Kelly. Requesting the board to make a motion to adopt the newly certified civil service list for entry-level patrol officer. Some background on that is we followed all the civil service guidelines. We conducted the physical and written examination on April 30th, followed by interviews on May 9th and 10th. We had, I'll give you some of the staggering numbers that we had. We had 47 people total apply for 13 departments in the Lehigh County Consortium test. 26 of them showed up to actually take the test. 23 passed. And with the people who met our requirements, after the interviews, we have 10 people left on our list, which is, I believe, in the packet by, not by name, but by ID number. So I'm requesting actually the Civil Service Commission actually certified that list last Wednesday at our meeting on May 11th. So I'm in front of the board this evening to request that the Board of Commissioners adopt that list for future hiring if the positions become available.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Dorney. Are there any questions from the board on this motion? Any from the public? Hearing and seeing none, do I hear said motion on this agenda item?
So moved.
I will second it. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Chief Dorney.
You're welcome. Thank you.
On to motion agenda item D. We have a motion requesting permission to authorize interim township manager Randy Cope to sign an agreement between South Whitehall Township and the Police Service of South Whitehall Township and badge number 138 as reviewed at an executive session held on May 4th, 2022. Are there any questions from the board on this matter? Commissioner Osborne.
Commissioner Kelly, thank you. Yes, I have no questions, but I do have a statement to make. I was not in the executive session on May 4th. I wasn't here in the meeting that evening. But I did speak with Chief Dorney earlier today to make sure I was familiar with the topic, and so I will be voting this evening.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the board? Any from the public? Do I hear a motion to proceed with said motion requesting this permission for this agenda item? I'll second that. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 10, correspondence and information items. I'll ask our interim township manager, Randy Cope, to please review these items for us.
Sure. For those of you interested in serving on one of our volunteer boards or commissions, please visit our website and download a copy of our volunteer board member application. Currently, we have one alternate vacancy on our Civil Service Commission, one vacancy on our Green Advisory Council, 2 vacancies on our Landscape Shade Tree Commission, 1 vacancy on our Parks and Recreation Board, and 3 vacancies on our Environmental Advisory Council. We do have a few upcoming meetings and events over the next week or two. On Thursday, May 19th, we'll have our next Planning Commission at 7:30 p.m. This Friday will be the township's first movie in the park. That will start at dusk, likely around 8:15 p.m. That will be held at Springhouse West Park. The movie is Luca. Monday, May 23rd, the Landscape and Shade Tree Commission will meet at 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 24th, the Planning Commission special meeting will be held at 7:30 p.m. Wednesday, May 25th, the Zoning Hearing Board will meet at 7 p.m. On Sunday, May 29th, we'll have a Memorial Day tribute concert with the Allentown Band at Springhouse Middle School at 7 p.m. And on Monday, May 30th, the township offices will be closed in the observance of Memorial Day.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board on any of these items? Anything from the public? Moving on to agenda item 11, old business. Again, I'll turn that over to our interim township manager.
Sure. So just a brief follow-up. Wares Dam is out to bid. It has been advertised on May 13th and as well as May 17th. Just a couple of the milestones upcoming here for this bid. May 24th, we'll have our mandatory pre-bid meeting. On May 31st, the interested contractors will need to submit their questions through Penn Bid Buy. On June 6th, we'll do our bid opening here at the township. And then on June 15th, we will bring a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that agenda item? Any from the public? Okay. Moving on to our comprehensive plan update. Call on our David Manhart.
So Randy, I wonder if you could pull up the website or you want me to try and switch it over? One of the two. We're both a little skittish about changing over. So just the homepage.
On the homepage.
I just want to go over a couple things that we've updated on the website late last week. So we added the comprehensive plan spotlight, I think we call it. So this is where the new information will reside with regards to the comprehensive plan. The link, the middle link, so click here for comment on goals and strategies. This is what we're calling the working draft. So as we go through these meetings, we have a draft goals and strategies. We put those up on this page and we'll start as we complete things on the draft sections, they will be placed on this page. So you'll get an idea of how the document's coming together. Within each of the sections, there is at the bottom, there's a section that will take you to a comment form. So as any members of the public, Board of Commissioners, Planning Commission, if you have an idea that you want to comment on something, this is where you would go in and you could link to resource protection goals and strategies. So all of this is on the website. I was saying, please work. So it works. So this is where you can upload comments, because a lot of times we talked about it at the workshop meeting. As we're going through this, there's a lot of information. People will oftentimes come up with an idea driving home. So this will provide an update. So we're getting better at getting these up quicker. So I wanted to provide that information. And the next workshop, which we will be covering housing and community utilities, no, community facilities, as new topics, and then reviewing refined goals for community utilities. So that's the topics for the next meeting, and I believe that one is, I think it's the 7th, because it's the Tuesday following the first Wednesday. So.
Very good. Thank you for adding that to the township website. I know that something we discussed in the workshop, and I invite any member of the public who's either here or listening to please log on to our website and participate, help as we plan for our growth for the next 10 years and get this comp plan pulled together. We need your input. So
Yeah, and if there's ideas, and one of the things that we're talking about is implementation items. So if there's things that any public feels that we should be doing related to the comprehensive plan, now's the time to put those comments in. So yes, please comment.
Dave, I'd just like to comment from the last meeting we had. I know there's been talk about flyers and kind of a save the date for the community. Obviously, there's input now. Dave Manor will accept it, but also the meeting for the community as a whole, South Whitehall Township residents. We want to get that out there as much as possible to everybody. I think it was September.
Yeah, we're working through the exact timeline.
We have that date yet, or is that
No,
still
we do
not? But it
not.
will be in
We do
September?
not. I'm hopefully, yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Okay.
We're working with Michael Baker to come up with the public engagement strategy to get that meeting kind of highlighted and on the books. And we haven't had that meeting yet.
very good. Any other questions from the board? Any from the public? Moving on to Jordan Creek Greenway. Randy, I don't know if you had anything
Nothing
to
further
add.
to
We've
report
already
on that topic.
discussed it. Okay, very good. So moving on to direction and discussion. Our first item this evening is our fire code ordinance. And I'm going to ask Don France, our South Whitehall Township Building Code official, to please introduce that item for us this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Again, commissioners. This is when the ordinances were presented to you tonight for approval, the 4 ordinances, you did not see the International Fire Code as one of them. First, let me say that there are portions of this 2018 International Fire Code that are adopted by the Uniform Construction Code. We need to do nothing about that. That is for new construction or renovations. But this fire code applies also to existing buildings, especially to existing buildings, commercial buildings in the township. And we need to adopt it. We have been adopting it since before I started working for the township as a commercial property maintenance code for fire safety in the township. I was preparing to do this to adopt the 2018 to stay in cycle with the rest of the international codes. And we had a discussion in the office, and I mean no disrespect by this, but at all. And I do not take exception to it. Attorney Roberts from Attorney Zader's office told us that we had a little issue with what we were doing, in that the repealer that is included in our previous fire code ordinance adoptions actually got rid of what was in our codified ordinances for open burning because it was inconsistent. We had not heard of this before. And again, I take no exception to it. That appears to be certainly accurate. Because of that, we actually now, for open burning, for outside fires, fall under the requirements of the 2015 fire code. Again, we just found that out. Those requirements are dramatically less restrictive than what the codified ordinances were. So the discussion item before you all tonight is to get a feeling on how you wish for us to proceed with this. Many ways we can do this. We can remove the open burning sections out of the fire code and go back to our previous open burning ordinances, which, by the way, date back, I believe, originally to 1965, which in my remembrance of things with my family and with my time in the township, probably dates to the initial trash collection and leaf collection. When you didn't have to burn your trash, you didn't have to burn your leaves anymore. That's, I believe, what this actually dates back to. And the way it's written kind of makes it seem that way also. But that prohibited mainly, actually all open fires that use wood as a fuel. It allows for propane grills. It allows for propane, natural gas, fire, outdoor fireplaces, if you will. But it did not allow for anything for wood as a fuel. International Fire Code does. And it's confusing. It's cumbersome and confusing for us as code enforcement people to enforce. And it's going to be especially confusing for residents to understand. It also presents the problem where, let's face it, as you drive around the township, we have a very diverse township. We have areas where you could safely have a bonfire of an incredible size and would be very little concern. And then we have townhomes. And in some neighborhoods, we have a mix of all three types of residential dwellings. Fernwood Terrace, we have singles, twins, and townhomes, all on one same street, as a matter of fact. The requirements are different for each. So whereas the person in the townhome, the requirements would be different for the person right next door in a twin. That seems bad. That seems like a position that is going to be tough to enforce and tough to defend. I would also say that historically over the years, we get many complaints, and Chief Dorney, we get many complaints about the smoke. That would be from wood fires. That would not be from natural gas, propane, cooking on a charcoal hibachi grill, from fire pits, campfires, chimeneas. I know the police get a lot of complaints. Code enforcement has got a lot of complaints. With the requirements of the fire code being adopted as is, those certainly going to encourage people to do more outside fires. They are going to be allowed to do more outside fires, and the complaints are going to go up. And lastly, or maybe I should have said this firstly, if you ask me, is the potential there to have a fire situation where we have involvement into a dwelling or structure and a potential for more injury or, God forbid, loss of life? Statistically, if we allow more fires, statistically, that chance increases. So looking for your feeling as to how to proceed with this. If the board is looking to allow more open fires, or if the board is in a position where they wish to limit more open fires.
Thank you for that presentation.
And I'm sorry, it is a complicated topic.
It is. I guess the first question that came to my mind when you explained that we receive a lot of complaints from the smoke from the wood, on the other side of that spectrum, are there residents who are contacting the township asking to have open burn in areas that have more land? So do we have a segment of the community that is looking to have a bonfire or a chimney on their property? So are we needing to look at, there's obviously different needs within the community.
Right now,
is what I'm trying to get at.
One of the things with the previous ordinance that have been in effect, there are places in the township where the Board of Commissioners have granted approval for people to do open fires. Jordan UCC Church, Troop 1600 at Jordan UCC Church, Troop at Asbury Methodist. I'm sorry, my Boy Scout troop numbers are not with me tonight. They have a campfire. They went to the board for approval. Shant's Orchard, for silvicultural reasons, before I started working for the township, has permission to burn. So we have had people reach out to us that way. Most recent was a silvicultural issue for agricultural at the very corner, northwest corner of the township, that reached out to us. Now, I don't know, Randy or Chief, if you have received requests of that, but there have been those instances where, and what would happen in that particular instance is it would come in for a fire code. Well, they would get your approval first. They would come in for a fire code. Parkland High School, when that was built, they did a large open burn there to get rid of some of the debris. Come to the commissioners for approval. They get a fire code permit, and then I work with them to make sure that it is done safely and to whatever the code was at that time.
Thank you.
I guess I got just a logic question. So thank you for your summary question. Do we want more or less open burning? Without going into any details, it seems like more open burning would be less safe, but don't know that that's necessarily true. So it seems like the key criteria is maximize safety or the acceptable level of safety in accordance with codes and regulations. What's the trade-off? What are we trading off against? People's outdoor pleasure or leisure in some cases?
Yes. Yes, that is a good way to say it. Because cooking devices, again, now a Traeger wood pellet system. Any of you have those? Any of you seen those? Those are designed to operate safely and don't operate with a tremendous amount of smoke. It really is leisure purposes more than anything. Yes. I mean, like I say, I can't sit here as a professional, fire safety professional, and say that nothing's going to happen if we allow more open burning. I just can't do that. Certain people will know how to do it safely and certain people won't. But again, life safety is the most important thing, but I think more of the potential is going to be that we are going to get more and more complaints about the smell of smoke, the odor of smoke in neighborhoods. As people have said, we can't even open our windows and enjoy a nice summer night.
Yes, I've been out on several of these calls also because there was a conception that I can have my open fire or my fire pit, and as long as I had a bag of hot dogs sitting next to me, that made it okay, which in the old or in that ordinance that John referred to, it wasn't okay because that specifically said that the primary source of fuel cannot be wood. It could be charcoal, it could be propane, it could be gas, but it cannot be wood. So that was a misconcept and over the last, several years, myself and John have gone out and talked to folks and educated them on that and went over that. So I think you're seeing there's a portion of the population that has fire pits, will use them, and pretty much it's kind of like when we get a complaint or a call, then we go on and we address it. But and it's in certain parts of the township, it's like, wow, it's really, I'm sure they're burning up here in a fire pit and nobody cares and nobody even notices. Versus I dealt with the same thing when I was in the city of Allentown. And I described it to them as because the people moved into the home and there was a fire pit there and logs. And they said, well, we have a fire pit. I said, it's not illegal to have a fire pit. It's not illegal to have the wood. It's not illegal to put the wood in the fire pit. It's illegal to light the wood on fire. And that's how we were at that point. That has all changed with that code and going to the 2015 code, which has those types of fire pits acceptable in that code. I don't know if that helps the discussion at all.
Does it make it more complicated if you look at the size of the property? You know, like if you have acreage,
Sure.
you know,
Personally, in the code, if I'm correct, John, they do give you specific distances you have to be away from the structure already. But yes, if you have acreage, it wouldn't matter. But that becomes a hard thing to regulate, monitor, or enforce. How just because I'm lucky enough to live here and I have acreage, I can have a chimney or a nice fire pit, as to where, you know, in a more residential area, I cannot. Like, my son lives up on Girard Avenue, and his area that would be, it could the smoke could be annoying a lot of neighbors a lot more easily, if that makes sense on that.
And one of the problems is in this code, in the fire code. Now, there's a good thing here. If board, and we want to limit this to open flame cooking devices, that's not contained in the open burning section. So the section open burning, the bonfires, the chimeneas, the fire pits, using the wood as a fuel can be removed and still keep the barbecue grills, things of that nature. Gas fire pits, gas items. There are so many exceptions. It's 25 foot, except in this case, 15 foot, then it can be 15 foot, except in this case. And then a 1 and 2 family dwellings, there may be no distance requirements. It is, I'd like to find the person that wrote this.
I guess my question would be for you, John, and you have an extensive background in this. What is your counsel to us for guidance? Just
Historically, there are more issues created by the allowance, again, not of cooking devices, of open fires in the township than there are benefits to allowing it.
And I know I've heard complaints from residents here about that, and our neighbors allow it, why don't we type of conversations. Is the industry moving away from open fires in the code, or are they just making it more complicated and kind of tossing it back to us to decide?
They're making it more complicated. Now, there is something I want to point out. And I can only guess if this is a reason, but there has to be. We moved to do everything in the 2018 code, the property maintenance code that Tom adopted. We like to stay in the same code year cycle because each code feeds off things in the other. They're not written separate and independent, and like the others don't exist. There are trade-offs because of things in other codes. Fortunately, the International Residential Code would require all new residential buildings to have a fire sprinkler system in them, except the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania removed that. That was removed by the Commonwealth. That does not happen, except townhomes. So 1 and 2 family dwellings, everything you see going on up here, and I'm not saying it's wrong, it's legal, it's fine, off of Winchester Road, the code as written would require fire sprinkler systems. Pennsylvania does not. Was this written with that in mind? It had to be, in my opinion, at least in the back of someone's mind. We're providing for life safety by, at some starting point in time, suppressing all residential buildings so we can start to permit things like this to happen. Except Pennsylvania messed that up.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kelly? Here's my thoughts. Just as I had asked Mike, we're going to be presented with 4 options. I think if you train people's eye to a recommendation, whether they accept that or not, that's a much easier path to make a decision.
Yep,
my thought is, please come to the board with your recommendation and include those who are involved in this area, and tell us why. That's my thought. I can't sit here tonight.
No, and I'm not expecting anyone or all of you to make a decision tonight. And I respect that. This is more of an introduction of the topic. Okay. And also to explain why we didn't adopt the fire code tonight with all the other codes. Absolutely. I can certainly prepare something. I can work with our staff to develop recommendations.
Brad, to tie into what you're saying, do you think we should tie it into a workshop?
Yeah, that would make
Just,
sense.
you know,
Yeah,
not,
because
not
it's-
the whole
it's-
night, but I mean,
It's not going to be a
I'm
5-minute
more
conversation.
confused now than I was before. If I should go home and light my charcoal grill.
You should read the memo I wrote to these two. I'd be fine with that.
And is there a timeline that you're hoping to get an action by the board?
Sooner rather than later, so everything is consistent. It's not, we still, well, right now, everything's like that's permitted, so.
Right. So
you know,
if I get a complaint tomorrow and Tom passes it on to me and I go out and speak to the folks,
yeah,
what do I say to them? Right now, according to following that code that I know we're under, the 2015 fire code, I have a hard time telling you that you can't burn in your fire pit because that's what we're under. We need to absolutely work with you on that. And as we need guidance, we're going to need whatever the rule is going to be. We're going to have to know what the rule is or what our rule is going to be for that, so that it's a clear cut thing, that there's not just a pack of hot dogs sitting on the counter or on the bench there and saying we're okay because we have hot dogs. It'll either be yes or no.
Informationally, the requirements of the 2018 International Fire Code are the same as the 2015. There were no changes in these sections.
Okay. Sounds good. So are there any other questions from the board? Any from the public? Yes. Sir, if you please come to the microphone and give us your name and address.
Yeah, my name is Jim Lenahan. I live at 2262 Albright Avenue. And I'm just confused as to the goals of this ban against fire pits, whether it's smoke or safety. But let's suppose it's safety. And there are areas around us which allow it. And I'm wondering how many fires are caused by fire pits in those areas that allow their use. Seems to me we should know that in deciding this.
Is that something, John, that you could do a little bit of research?
I can ask the fire marshals around our area. I will respond to you, sir, in that in South Whitehall, the answer is I can't remember many, if any, but we've had the prohibition. So that's not a fair answer to your question. And also the neighboring municipalities. So that's not a fair answer to your question.
Right.
Absolutely.
Maybe we could have that prepared in the next presentation to the board so that we've got that information to factor in.
Yep,
Very good.
Point taken.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, very good. Thank you. Moving on to item B, Land Preservation Committee report.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Let me just start out by saying Commissioner Walk and I are on the Land Preservation Committee, and we are interested in giving a presentation this evening. But a couple things to start out with. Land Preservation Committee in South Whitehall was restarted about a month ago with the promise of Commissioner Walk and I that we would begin working immediately on fulfilling the interests of this board in preserving open space. It's an exciting and critical time in South Whitehall. It's a golden opportunity that we have before us. And tonight you'll hear some of the groundwork that Commissioner Walk and I have begun on behalf of the full board. At the end of the presentation, we will simply ask for the board's approval to allow staff and our solicitor to begin work that we will need to make to make this initiative successful. And I want to say both of them, the staff and our solicitor, have extensive experience in this area. And if we allow them to go ahead with work, they will do so in a speedy and successful way. There's no doubt in my mind. We'll be extremely happy with the results. Some additional thoughts before we get started. First, I wanted to apologize for the late arrival of the outline of our work to our full board. and to the public. Commissioner Walk and I, as well as Dave Manhart and Randy Cope, worked all the way up until this afternoon in preparing the presentation that you'll see. It didn't pass final review until 15 minutes before we distributed it and made it available on board docs. So I wanted to say that up front. I apologize for the suddenness of this. What you'll hear is background, though, and not necessarily something that needs to be fully acted on. Secondly, I wanted to state upfront and emphatically that landowners have the right to develop their land in accordance with existing zoning ordinances and laws. The initiative you'll be hearing about will be the actions the township can take to prepare us financially to work cooperatively with our respected landowners. We will need the landowner's agreement in all cases as they make their land available for sale or preservation. I personally believe that this respectful approach will be the most successful one and one that we should adhere to and honor as well. I think that also with this approach, we will, as we seek a balance between preservation and land development, this preservation will help to enhance the vibrancy and attractiveness of our community. And lastly, I just wanted to say, we do not have all the answers this evening. We don't have them quite yet. We did as much work as we could in the past month. So we'll listen intently to your comments and questions from our board and the public, answer those we're able to, and ask for your patience in obtaining the responses to those that we're not able to answer. So with that introduction, Randy and Dave, please roll the reel.
So what we're going to do going forward here, we're going to go through this report, which is actually a presentation. I'll give a little more intro, then Dave Manhart's going to make some comments, and then back to me for the back end. Yeah, so this is the first ever Land Preservation Committee report to the BOC or public after, awaiting us getting reactivated for quite a while. Commissioner Osborne and I are on a team, but to acknowledge Randy and Dave Manhart are the other two people on our team. Next slide. So this slide shows our meeting purpose, which is to present this report and provide some specific recommendations, and then ask the board to provide direction about what the next steps should be. Next slide. Nope, you got the wrong package. That's the right one? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. We had a couple different presentations within that last 15 minutes. All right, I'm sorry. So tonight, we're going to explain the front-end strategic work required to start land preservation. We're going to cover the opportunity and the associated cost and the available funding. Other successful municipalities have done exactly this, and they've done it out of necessity. We can't preserve land without the necessary funds, and that's why we need to start here. I'd also like to say this is the only topic we're coming tonight. This land preservation subject is so broad, and we've only had a few meetings in this last month. So to manage expectations, we are not going to address any other broader issues associated with land preservation, except for what you see on this slide. Now we'll turn over to Dave.
So with regards to land preservation opportunity, we've been discussing this at our comprehensive plan workshops with regards to resource protection. So one of the tools that we have available, data sets that we use, is called the National Land Cover Data Set. It's a pretty high resolution or low resolution data set because it's the national coverage. So the numbers are estimates. But what we have here on this map, and hopefully you can see it okay, is we have in 2001, the developed and undeveloped areas are the darker or brighter shades of green and orange. And then in 2022, you can see some of the lighter yellow areas for Blue Barn Meadows, Hills of Winchester, and the Cracker Sport warehouses are a few that jump to mind. And then also in there is the 2022 approved Ridge Farm development is also shown on that map. What this provides us with is a timeline of development pressure. So where were we in 2001 and where are we currently? And next slide. So in 2001, we were roughly 52% developed, 49% undeveloped, out of roughly 11,000 acres total. And then in 2022, we moved up to 55.8 developed and down to 44.2 developed. And then the approved piece is the orange hatching. And you can see that it's moving into the undeveloped areas. And then we also have roughly 6.5% of our area as preserved. So think of Township parks. Covered Bridge Park is a perfect example. The Springhouse donation that we received, the preserved farm in the town, and then there's some random conservation easements of preserved land. So what this chart demonstrates is development is going to continue. It's just the nature of the beast is going to continue into that undeveloped area. And then we also have the opportunity to preserve land to kind of counteract some of that development so that we can save what we have an opportunity to save. So that kind of provides a snapshot of where we were and where we're headed and defines that opportunity to preserve some of this undeveloped land. I think, you want me to?
No, I got the rest.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Okay. So our committee prepared this top-down summary of the opportunity and the associated cost. There's 11,000 total acres in our township. There's 4,200 undeveloped acres. And our committee proposed that we could target up to 1,000 acres. This is a high-end estimate for preservation over a 10-year period. We have to choose something to define the opportunity, so we chose 1,000 acres out of the 4,200. And then to define the estimated cost, we assigned a potential cost range of $10,000 to $50,000 per acre. And we realize land does sell for higher price than that. Land is sold for up to $150,000 per acre, fee simple. But we don't envision that we would ever be willing to pay that much to preserve land. And these are fee simple costs. Of course, it costs less to purchase development right easements than to purchase land fee simple. If you put this together and do the math, it would cost $10 million to $50 million over 10 years to preserve 1,000 acres using this basic estimating method. So it's just to give you a basis and get some numbers out in front of the board and the public. Next slide. So here, regarding the funding, we need to emulate successful townships' land preservation financing. We had a couple townships, Lower Mount Bethel and Bushkill Township, share their strategic financing method at our April workshop, and that goes along these lines. We need additional funds to start land preservation. We will not have enough money from grants. We simply cannot get $10 to $15 million from grants. And then in addition, typically grants require the township to provide matching funds. So we cannot typically use grant money without another source of complementary money. So it's somewhat inescapable that the township needs increased revenue, increased from earned income tax to provide the required funds. And in order to do that, an open space referendum would be required to increase the EIT. The bottom portion here regarding timing, just in a broad overview, an open space referendum must appear on the November ballot this year in order to obtain revenue that can be started in 2023. That is, it could be put into the budget. But if we don't do that and we wait for a referendum in either of the 2023 elections, then we won't have the money to, start our ramping up our land preservation program until 2024. So next. The EIT revenue information on this slide, I gotta be careful. It's for illustration purposes only. We're just trying to show you what the numbers are. We're not proposing any EIT increase at this time. We're simply presenting you this estimate. So the table illustrates that there's two EIT options. One is a low end 0.15%. The high end is a 0.25%. And these two options, if they were done, would provide $1.2 to $2 million increased revenue per year. And like the other townships do, they look out over 10 years. That would provide $12 to $20 million over a 10-year period. So next. So if you put this all together, the information on the past few slides, an EIT tax increase could deliver $12 to $20 million of the potential $10 to $15 million required to preserve that 100,000 acres of land over a 10-year period. So let's go next. So we wanted to think ahead here, since we're talking about a possible referendum, what's the time frame look like? We put together this bar chart. It includes all the necessary steps and the logic. It's unreadable. That's why we made a table on the next page. So let's go there. All right. So this table lists the work. It's all in a bar chart. But this is the work that would be required to do a referendum for a November ballot. If the BOC gives direction tonight to do the very first step, and I'll just say, that's all we're asking for tonight is to do this very first step. And that would be to begin work, the committee working with Solicitor Zader on the open space referendum, which would include the ballot question. If we get that direction, Solicitor Zader would do that work, come back and review a draft ordinance, could be done by June 1st. And a BOC could review that, provide their comments, could be revised and come back, after that revision by June 15th. And then the township would be in a position to advertise the ordinance in the second half of June if the BOC agreed to do that. And again, there's some float. There's about a month float in here. It's a very ambitious schedule, of course, but there's a month float before we would hit the August 13 deadline, which is when the referendum would have to be submitted to the Lehigh County Government Office. So next. So we're in the home stretch here. So here's our recommendation. Commissioner Osborne said it at the beginning. We recommend that the BOC provide direction to take this first step, which is required for us to move forward with land preservation. And that is to initiate work to develop the ordinance that would enable the township to place the open space referendum on the November ballot so that the voters can vote. We think it's very important the voters spoke in the election, and we think, we give this back to the voters to decide what they want to do here. We would place it in their hands to approve or disapprove an EIT increase. So next. So we kindly ask the board to provide this direction, and I won't read this again, but to provide this direction to move forward with this very initial piece of work. And that's the end of our report, and now we should move to comments and questions on the subject.
Everybody's looking at me. This is the first I saw this, obviously, and Brad, you did admit that you put it on. I think I actually saw that it was added at 5 after 6 this evening. I'm not in a position tonight to make a decision to move forward at all. That's me. Until I review this more. Further, I'm not sure I'm in a position to vote on an increase in EIT. There's never a good time to increase anything. And I think certainly now is not a good time, in my opinion, to add any EIT to this township, to the township residents. With the economy the way it is, I filled up my gas today in my car. It was $4.96 for a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I saw that, I almost fell over. I couldn't believe it. $4.96 every day. It's different. So I don't know if I could, in good faith, add an EIT to the township residents of South Whitehall Township at the present time. I do believe that the economy will turn around for the better for all concerned. And it will, I know that we would lose a year. I understand that, but I have to study this further than obviously just seeing it for the first time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hodges?
Yeah, I do have a comment. First of all, I wanted to thank you both for doing all this work. I too I kind of panicked when I saw this coming in so late because I thought I don't have a chance to study this now and look at it, but I appreciate everything you've done and thank you for going through it so thoroughly with us. I have a question. I always held Lower Macungie in such high regard. It just seemed like they did everything right, at least under Ron Beitler's watch. And they've been preserving farms for at least a decade, and they only went to referendum last year. So how did they do it? And have you explored the tools that they've used? And will that be part of this preservation effort? Like a transfer of development rights. I think they took out a loan to finance some of their land. What other options? I'm not saying I'm against this at all. This is up to the voters. But what are the other options for doing preservation? Because I'll tell you, I'm not, sure of how they work and the time they take.
Yeah,
So,
just a thought, and I know David wants to say something. We do know what the other two townships who presented at the workshop did, and they did what we are proposing, proactive look for, a 10-year program. Ron Beitler may be virtually in the meeting, and he might be able to make a comment, but let's go to David.
So, at the planning workshops, and people are probably tired of hearing me say the tools in the planner's toolbox. There's transfer of development rights, there's conservation easements through grants, the county program for agricultural land. And they're all great programs, but to me, the biggest tool in that toolbox is having funding behind you. So for the township to have funding available to finance, if you're going out for a bond, the bond rating is going to see there's a steady stream of income. It's going to be easier to get financing for larger purchases. The other piece of it is you get a seat at the table. One of the things we've heard with a lot of the development coming in is why doesn't the township buy it? Because there's no funding. It's just in the general fund. So to have that dedicated funding source to get that seat at the table is probably the biggest piece to the puzzle. And a lot of the other programs and tools, transfer of development rights are voluntary, and this would be a voluntary program, but it's a way to compensate landowners for the value of their property. The agricultural Lehigh County Ag Program can give up to $6,000 an acre. And granted, that's for development rights. That's not for the purchase of the property. But typically, you're seeing appraisals for that program come through $10,000 to $15,000 an acre. So there's a difference there. And if the township has the dedicated funding and the dedicated source of funding, that enables the township to contribute to that differential over and above any grant funding. So anything that the Lehigh County can provide, we can then provide additional funding on top of that.
Yeah.
And with the Lehigh County program, there's other incentives. If the municipality is involved in it, they get a higher priority. There's a lot of things that come out of having that dedicated source of funding.
I just want to kind of hitchhike on a quick point Dave made. You see the order of magnitude of numbers in this presentation, right? Tens of millions of dollars. And that is consistent with the two townships who presented at the workshop. By comparison, this township, who has no preservation program, whose residents have, I'll say, had an outcry to create a preservation program. Here's where we are. In our last two budgets, we debate and struggle whether we can afford to put $200,000 in the budget in case a property comes available that we may want to purchase. All five of us as commissioners have observed and have said in the past, this township has been reactive in the past. We now need to be proactive. And this is the program that allows you to be proactive, to take a step forward, even if it's a small step forward, and do this initial piece of work. If it lands where Commissioner Kennedy is, it's not the right time, et cetera, et cetera. I'd ask you to consider that we probably will take a first step to ask Solicitor Zader to do some work. So we're asking you to agree to have him start that work. We're not asking to put an EIT on the referendum tonight. We're not asking for a specific amount of money. We're just asking, could this township please take a first step in this direction?
I'd like to comment if I could. I appreciate the presentation tonight. This is the first I'm hearing of any of this. I appreciate the workshop we had in April. It was some very good information for us. It was the first time we've had a discussion as a group, as a community, to what is land preservation, what are our options. There's a lot of information out there, and in my opinion, I think we've scratched the surface. I do agree with both of the commissioners' comments so far to this. Yes, we have a need for this. Yes, it's something that the township probably should have done a few years back. We've seen other townships neighboring us who have had very successful programs for quite some time, but we can't go backwards. We need to move forward. We do have a few options, though. I mean, there is an election in November. There's an election next May. There's an election a year from November. I hesitate to consider a tax at this point for the same reasons Commissioner Kennedy stated. our economy is in a place that I think most of us haven't had to accommodate in our budgets. When we fill up the gas tank, when we go to the grocery store, everyone's feeling I think it's 8.3 increase in the economy. Price of gas is almost $5 a gallon right now. And all of our electric bills are going to go up 38% in the next month. So it's certainly, it's a struggle for me. I know that this is something our community wants, something this board has expressed a desire to begin, but I ask myself, would waiting till next May give us more time, first of all, to see if the economy rebounds? Secondly, certainly give us all more time to understand more of the options. Dave, you've outlined some of them for us tonight. One of the questions I had from the workshop we had was I thought that one of the comments that was made with the official map actually directs where preservation is desired. And I know that I'm on planning commission, so I know we're working through comp plan, we're working through our parks and rec plan. We're going to look at the cost for fees in lieu of open space. There's a lot of balls being juggled right now in our township that have to do with growth. We're working on hiring a long-range planner, hopefully very soon. And as I kind of sort through all this in my head, I think these are all very good and very important topics. It's a very exciting initiative, but I think that me personally, I think it would make sense to wait until the spring referendum, spring election, to give us all more time to wrap our heads around all of this, to understand how was that land chosen. I have a lot of questions. It's the first I'm seeing any of this tonight. I've just like you all. So it's a lot to absorb, and any time as an elected official we're considering taxes, I take it very seriously, and I certainly need more time to digest and understand what would be the best course moving forward for the community. So, but Dave, sorry, there was a question there. The official map, I know a little bit about it. I know we've discussed it, and I know it's tied to the comp plan too. And at our workshop, you gave us a timetable that made it seem like the end of this year, the comp plan would be complete. So can you speak a little bit to the official map and its role in land preservation?
So the official map is another tool in the toolbox that designates significant areas worth preserving. Take agriculturally significant soils. So if you had that on your official map, when a development came in, it gives you that, essentially that seat at the table. It says we're interested in purchasing development rights or working with you as the property owner to preserve certain pieces of it or certain areas of it. So it's another way to get the seat at the table. But once you get to the table, if you don't have that funding, we can work with programs and, there's all the other tools, but, if somebody's thinking about developing their property, they're looking to cash out on their property. So there's always that money in the equation that will be considered. So that's another piece of it. One of the things that will come out of this that was in the workshop, I believe it was Bushkill Township, had a prioritization or a ranking system that would get developed as part of this effort. That would be part of the preservation program. And one of the things that I've kind of talked about and mentioned throughout the process is as we're going through these 2009 goals, if there's things that bubble up because of timing, we don't have to wait for the update of the comp plan to move forward. If it's something that the board feels, we need to move forward with, whether it's land preservation or, I don't know, transportation improvements or things like that. So, there's other work that needs to be done to get a full-blown program going, but one of the first significant steps is having that dedicated funding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll give a general answer. Having gotten educated from Donna Wright, Ron Beitler, the multiple townships, Donna Wright's counterpart in Northampton County. There's a whole host of work that has to get done. There's 6 methods or 6+ methods that I'm aware of that you use to preserve land. That's all the technical details. It's zoning changes, official map, and there's a whole textbook on all the things you need to do to preserve land. Every one of those people will tell you, Donna Wright will tell you, the other township officials will tell you, you can't get started without the money. So that's where we're at. I mean, if there's no interest to move forward even with this very first step, there's a lot of other things we can do. We can do the marketing. There's a slide that we didn't present on what a marketing program would be. There's a whole textbook of things we can do and will eventually do once we get the money. If we don't move forward, we're sitting here in May. We're talking a year and a half, January 2024, before we would have this step change addition of money in order to really have a land preservation program in this township.
There's no other questions from the board. Are there any questions from anyone in the public? Or if you come up to the microphone and give us your name and address, please.
Manley H. Offutt Jr., 1991 Molinaro Drive. I'd just like to point out that, and I can't bring this down to Lehigh County or especially South Whitehall, but nationally, farmers with the price of fuel oil or diesel fuel and the price of fertilizers are hurting. So you can figure that farms are going to be coming on the market in the near future. I don't know, a year, 2 years, whatever. But that's nationally, that's what's happening. The other comment I have is you might want to do like you did Weir's Dam and put this to a referendum, whether people want to pay the extra EIT or not. That's all.
Thank you. Sure, come on up, sir.
Sam Sacco, 1898 Blue Barn Road, Orfield. Just a question, when there's a development, there's a certain amount of acreage that's supposed to be put aside for open space. Can't you increase the amount of open space that's required from the developer? Is that set by the township? Or is it just arbitrary what the developer wants to give you? So what I'm saying is, like, let's say the development over here at Winchester. So you got 10 acres of open space. Why can't you bump that up to 20 acres from the developer? So you're going to be putting more land in open space. It's not going to cost the township any money. And the other question is, if you do purchase a large plot, a large amount of acreage, does that stay open in perpetuity? Or is it a situation where 10 years down the road, all of a sudden the township needs money, so let's sell this 20 acres over here to get the money? So once you buy the land, is it going to be the township's land forever? Or if you run into a financial problem 10 years down the road, you're going to say, okay, we're going to sell this 20 acres.
Sam, I think the answer, let's say your second question first. I think it depends on the mechanism used to work with that landowner. For instance, and Solicitor Zader, you are the expert in this, so if I'm wrong, correct me for sure, but I'm trying to answer. If it's a fee simple purchase, which means the township takes total ownership of that property, including the maintenance and everything on that, then yeah, I think it's true. If some board or sometime in the future, the situation is such that they want to sell that to get the money back, yes. If you use transfer of property rights, then the answer to that most often is no. It's preserved in perpetuity. And the township cannot, they don't have the right to develop that or sell that.
Yeah, and I would say for development easements, I don't know if there's a set standard. So Solicitor Zader weigh in. I think it would depend on the agreement that's written.
That's correct. There are many different options, Sam, that can exist. So take, for example, the tract recently donated to the township by the kind gentleman for the parcel over on Springhouse Road. There are deed restrictions, and if you were here at the public meeting, you heard what those are. So the township, for instance, couldn't sell that in 10, 20, 30 years for the purpose of raising money and then allowing that tract to be developed. It's been deed restricted. And everything that was just said by our two commissioners is correct as well. Turning to your first question about having a developer dedicate additional land, you gave the example of 20 versus 10 acres up at Winchester. The Department of Community and Economic Development publishes the approach that is supposed to be used by a municipality in determining what the proper amount of acreage is for dedication for open space, recreation space in connection with development. And every municipality is going to differ as to how that gets analyzed based upon the needs that exist in the township, existing parks and open space, whole number of factors that get considered. If the township just arbitrarily says we want twice as much, that is something that a developer could possibly challenge. But admittedly, it's a very inexact science. But it is appropriate to follow the DCED guidelines in coming up with that amount of open space.
Okay, one thing, if you're talking about increasing taxes to purchase the land, so there will be no deed restrictions on it. In other words, there'll be an outright purchase by the township. So the seller will have nothing to say. In other words, once they agree on the price, the township purchases the property. It's not a donation. The township owns the property outright.
It depends. If it's not through an EIT funds program, and therefore the typical county and municipal collaboration for preservation via covenant isn't being used, and it's just an outright fee simple purchase. And since Commissioner Hodges mentioned Laura McCungy, one of its preservation efforts a few years ago was Camp Olympic. I don't know what the specific restrictions, if any, are on that, but what I have seen over the years is that because the amount of money oftentimes paid by municipality, either for covenants, for easements that preserve, or for outright fee simple purchases, tend to be less than fair market value, because most municipalities aren't going to have the funds to pay true full fair market value. It's usually a property owner that has an interest in some measure of preservation in the first instance. And so they're willing to work with the township for a price below market to achieve a mutual goal. But the quid pro quo of taking that lesser price as a property owner is that you want to have it preserved. You don't want it to turn around and be used for another purpose. I am aware, though, for example, of nearby municipality where there was a small pocket park that existed for a number of years. It had been a small amount of acreage donated as part of a development project by a developer. It was dedicated to the township without restriction. And that township turned around and sold the pocket park land for development of 2 or 3 homes and took those monies and applied them elsewhere, I believe for park purposes, but nonetheless, that park did disappear because in that particular instance, there was no covenant on the property.
Thank you.
Sure.
I believe we have some questions in the chat. Do we want to quick?
Yes, Robert Hodges, 1707 Penn's Crossing. You can go ahead and unmute, and hopefully it works.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I have two comments and a question. One, first of all, as I campaigned for all 5 of the commissioners over the past 2 years and knocked on doors, I want to, remind everybody that the single number one issue that people kept raising over and over again was farmland preservation. So I would like to congratulate the board tonight for finally making serious efforts to move forward with this. It's been something that's been lacking in this township for a very long time. So thank you to the board for finally listening to the citizens for what they've most loudly been asking for, and to Commissioner Welk and Osborne for spearheading this effort. Thank you to all of you, and to you two specifically. The other comment is that as people did speak to us, what they specifically asked for was farmland preservation. It wasn't just open spaces, it was farmland. So I hope that as we move forward with this, we make an effort to specify that whatever properties we may purchase, we do whatever possible to maintain it as farmland if at all possible. My question is that if I remember correctly, last year, the township borrowed, I believe, $13.5 million. I don't know if that had a specific purpose or if it has been earmarked for specific things, but as we are deciding whether to move forward quickly with an EIT or to wait a while for the economy to improve, is there any possibility that that money in some way, if some land came forward in the next few months or the next year before an EIT can be approved or voted on, is that money available to possibly move quickly on something before an actual EIT can be voted on? Thank you very much.
I can answer that if that's okay. So the bond we did take out was for specific purposes. It was to refinance existing township debt, as well as the township building, and $600,000 for capital projects, which in this case may be applied to Wares Dam.
And Mr. Hodges, Rob?
Yes.
You still there? Okay.
Yep.
Again, I'm going to defer to Solicitor Zader, but I will try to answer your question. Yes, you're right. What we heard most was farmland preservation. And I think one of the reasons we heard that is because that's what we see predominantly when we go on, up north on Cedar Crest or Mock Chunk, east and west of both north of Walberthill. But I believe that the law requires, it cannot be specific, and this is where Solicitor Zader can weigh in on this. I think the law requires that the wording of the referendum must also include open space, woodlands, wetlands, different kind of habitats. It may not require all this, but certainly it's not specific and only to farmland preservation. Is that correct?
Yeah, we put up the slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Commissioner Osborne is correct. Also, Zader weigh in. So as an amateur, yes, it's required by law. Other townships have identified that. So when we talk about a referendum, it would cover all of that. So let's have Solicitor Zader comment, and then I want to show you one more slide.
I can tell you that typically it will. I can tell you that municipalities like to have the flexibility of using the EIT funds for more than just farmland preservation. And as someone mentioned earlier, I think Dave Manhart, typically what will happen is either at the county level, the township level, or both, there'll be a prioritization of what properties to preserve based on a combination of factors. And so the answer is yes, that typically all those are included. Point blank answer your question, must they all be included? I can't say for certain.
And Commissioner Zader, I'm sorry, Solicitor Zader, could you?
Been promoted.
You have. Is that a promotion? Could you speak to, I believe the governor just signed a bill regarding the EIT that 25% of the funds collected can actually now be used for existing maintenance of properties the township has acquired prior to the referendum being approved. Can you speak to that?
I did see the headline on that. Admittedly, have not looked at the statute yet, So I assume that the way you characterized it, which is what I saw in the news, is correct, but I've just not read it yet.
Okay. So
But I can also
75%.
tell you that in municipalities that have an EIT and are looking to preserve land, most often for farmland, but sometimes for the other purposes that were mentioned a moment ago, the question of use of those funds for other than direct compensation, for instance, for maintenance, upkeep, soft costs in connection with the acquisition, that's typically a question that gets asked at that time. So I think the legislation is important for us to key in on at some point when you decide, if you decide to move ahead with an EIT.
So let me highlight, if the board had agreed to take this small first step where we would be allowed to speak with solicitors later on this subject and start to think about what a draft referendum ordinance would look like, regardless of when it's implemented, these are the issues we would be addressing. How to write it, to cover all the different categories that are on the slide there, and how to do that legally. We actually have at least 4 reference ordinances from other townships. We know one neighboring township which approved their referendum last November. It's definitely worded open space. And it doesn't include the other categories, but it's understood that open space means all the other categories, so that can be done legally, provided the right language is put in there. I want to give another type of answer to Robert Hodges' comment about farmland prioritization. Could you go to one more slide, Randy? No, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Little tough to see. This is a table provided by Donna Wright, Lehigh County Farmland Preservation. And this specifically, it has to be qualified. This is specifically numbers of farms and acreage that are preserved using the Lehigh County Matching Gift Program. That's where we provide matching funds, and if we do that, we can get state funding. So I asked to put this up here because it just illustrates where South Whitehall stands relative to at least 10, 12 other municipalities on this table. This is not the first time we're seeing this. This has come up repeatedly over the last 2 years. I put it back up to provide the motivation that is that we should do something to move forward, like Dr. Hodges just told us.
One more.
Robert Hodges has follow-up.
Hi, based on everything that was just said, I understand that any referendum might have to be worded to possibly be used for many different things. What I'm hoping and asking is that if a farm actually is purchased by the township, that everything possible be done to keep it a farm and not turn it into something else. And then my question in terms of the money that was borrowed, okay, that is earmarked for other things. Again, until a referendum possibly can be put on the ballot, can we borrow more money to, if an opportunity came up to purchase a piece of property that we want to act on quickly, is there a possibility to borrow more money? Since we borrowed 13.5 last year, would we be able to borrow more money for that specific purpose if we have not gotten a referendum done yet?
Yeah. So on that point, as Randy Cope and Dave Manhart have taught me, and as Dave Manhart said maybe subtly 10 minutes ago, yes, you can finance a bond, but the financial institution will want to know how you're going to make your timely payments, and you need money to do that. So the CIT money would be able to make those bond payments. David, you can say it in much better
I would just like to
words
add,
than me.
Yeah, I would just like to add, if an opportunity arises to purchase a farm, we will do everything in our power to get it. And, when the opportunities arise, we do our best to work with a landowner that's interested, even mildly interested. We work with them to try and get them to understand the programs that are available. So if an opportunity comes up, we're going to look at every option.
Thank you. We have a comment from one of our citizens.
Is this on? Yes, it is. Okay. Jacob Roth, 1499 White Oak Road. I'll first say I concur with everything Rob Hodges said. Having knocked on a lot of doors, talked to a lot of people the past few years, this is the top priority. And it's something, even now, 6 months, 7 months post-election, I still hear about, particularly with newly proposed developments. I think the idea of a referendum should be further explored. However, taking everything into account, I know the new piece of legislation that you mentioned, I'm not familiar with it, but I think we need to make sure that the township would have the discretion of using that fund. And by discretion, I mean the board, having the discretion of using all those funds for acquiring new land and maintaining new land. But before any of that, I think an action that either the board or the staff or the Land Preservation Committee needs to take is reaching out and talking to landowners. Like it was stated, the only way land is preserved is if landowners voluntarily enter into an agreement. So in South Whitehall, we're kind of unique in that we have both small landowners and very large landowners. And I think an important first step should be done, regardless of what the board decides tonight on this, is that we need to talk to landowners and not only gauge where they're at, if they're interested in preservation, but now we know some of the options. You know, there's a possibility for referendum. We know they could enter into deed transfers like the property on Springhouse Road, whether it's, purchasing development rights, et cetera. I think an important first step is talking to the landowners and gauge their interest. We may have a landowner come to us and say, yeah, there's this property that we would want to transfer to the township, minimal expense. Landowners may be a little more tough. They may want a little bit more compensation. They may want a conservation easement if it's, wetlands or forestry, or they may want the township to purchase the development rights, in which case you need money. But I think an important first step that the Preservation Committee and the board needs to take is talking to landowners, because until that happens, we know the potential, but we want to know the intent and the beliefs and the values of our current landowners. So very important first step.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience with any comments?
Can I just add to that?
Oh, sure.
Is that step is constantly ongoing. We're constantly in conversations with landowners. We're well aware of the landowners that are out there that own the property. So we are certainly on the pulse of those landowners and kind of have an understanding of where they're looking to move forward with projects, and keeping that conversation alive. So it's kind of an ongoing process. It's not anything that's really documented, but it's something that, we keep the lines of communication open.
Thank you. Sorry, good evening.
Good evening. Dave Burke, Buck Trail Road. I know that the topic of land preservation is supportive by all of you. It's been on all of your campaign platforms. Mike Wilk actually started on a committee in 2000, early 2000, with a board member who's no longer with us on the board, but that got waylaid by the pandemic. And here we are starting up again. Mike has a proposal tonight that Mr. Zader be given the opportunity to work on something for the next meeting. I don't know what is intended after that. Several of the board members said you haven't read any of this information. You got it at the last minute. Perhaps an approach could be, I don't know how much work it is for Attorney Zader to be engaged in this for the next meeting. But if you could all come back next week, that work gets done and you get a chance to think about it, look at the proposal here, and then proceed forward. It seems that might be an approach that moves us off the dime here. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know, if Attorney Zader does the work, what's the next step? I don't know.
Yeah. So let me pick up on that. That's pretty insightful, actually, Mr. Burke. Yeah. So the way the times table's constructed and the way we present it was, let us go do work, come back with a draft ordinance, see if you like it. All right, we don't have the support to do that. So I'll paraphrase what Dave Burke said. Would the board be amenable to allow us to have a discussion with Joe Zader, considering everything we talked about tonight, and just start to get our heads around the issues that need to be considered if and when we do a draft ordinance, all the issues that were brought up here tonight. It's basically saying, can we continue to have a conversation? There's this big sensitivity about using our third parties, even Solicitor Zader. Can we have a conversation with him around this subject, or does the board think that we shouldn't even do that?
I'll jump in. It's always important. Both of you and Commissioner Osborne are on the subcommittee for land development, and to continue to bring information to us, just like our other subcommittees work. That's very important. As far as a next step being preparing a referendum ordinance for the, as next step, as I said earlier, I would be much more comfortable, and this is a 6-month wait instead of a November ballot going into the spring. So we've got more time to explore and understand as a board. This is a very important but complicated topic. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand that I am fully supportive in moving forward with this. It's just, for me, timing, I think we would personally be better off to wait till the spring election. But I think it would be important to continue to speak with other municipalities, bring their success stories, the steps that they took. I think it's important for me to have a better understanding of how did we arrive at these 1,000 acres? How do we work with comp plan, official map? There's a lot of information that I need to pull this all together. So that's where I am on this.
My comment is, I think Dave Manhart hit it on the head. If something would come to fruition where we did have a landowner that wanted to proceed with land preservation, farm, agricultural preservation, we'd make it happen somehow. Exactly. I mean, it's, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. It's been done by other municipalities. We can copy. Joe is very good on this, and we can certainly, we'll make it happen. As Jacob Roth said, we need to talk to the landowners to get somebody on board before we can, before we put the cart before the horse.
My name is Larry Livett, and we've lived at 3608 Highland Street for 50 years. And I don't know the answer to this complicated issue. And I have a very simple suggestion or thought. I look around and there are 3 out of 5 new board members of the South Whitehall Commission. And I personally got dozens and dozens of petitions that helped elect you guys, if I may use guys generically. Land preservation was high on the list of the comments that I heard from the people whose doors I knocked on. And I have full confidence that you guys will do the right thing. but know that many of us who moved here years ago came here because there was so much open space and land, and call it whatever category you want. So I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I can express my personal opinion, and I know I speak for many township residents, that we have confidence that you're going to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've been an hour at this, and I know we have a staff member with another agenda item to discuss. I don't mean to squelch any conversation here, but I think
Commissioner
we've
Kelly?
spent a good deal of time on this.
If I can interrupt, okay, so I heard and understood your response. I heard and understood Commissioner Kenny's response. I'm not sure that I heard from Commissioner Hodges that she also does not want to approve the initial step of allowing staff to continue to working on this and allow our solicitor. So I interject that. All we're asking for is for them to be able to spend time under the direction of the full board to continue in this effort. What we decide to do with it down the line is what we decide to do with it based on input from the public as well. There's very little leeway in this schedule to take a 2-week pause for this very initial and simple step and spend those 2 weeks doing nothing when we could use those 2 weeks in a very productive and needed way if we had those 2 weeks. So I guess I would like to hear from Commissioner Hodges how she feels about this.
Can I just clarify, to work with staff, you always have that opportunity. You mentioned staff and solicitors.
Right.
So you're always allowed to work with staff as a subcommittee, correct?
Yeah, we
You're
realize
asking-
that.
Correct, okay.
Yeah, we realize that.
Okay.
Oh, well, okay, I just want to, let's clarify that. So Randy and Dave, do you interpret that or understand that to mean that we can continue in the same pace and direction that we did in these last 2 weeks? We respectfully ask the support of the board because we don't want to be directing staff, as we don't want anyone else directing staff without support of the full board. So
Well,
let's make sure we understand what that is.
Sure, I'm unaware of the pace or the amount of work. I have no concept of how much work the staff or time with meetings. I don't know what's been done, so I can't even comment on that.
There's certainly additional tasks we can be working on. I do think if this is something that the full board is in agreement with to approach for the November referendum, we need to get to work on that. And the first step is developing a draft ordinance. If the board's not interested in that and we want to take a different approach and start with education, reaching out to landowners, kind of taking the temperature out there, there's plenty of work we can do to keep that moving. But at the same point, if this has been a hot topic, I've been hearing about it for years. I know the board's been elected on it, and amongst other things, obviously, but this was one of the big topics. And as Commissioner Walk has mentioned, if this does wait until the spring ballot, which is very possible, if it does, we will not start seeing revenue until the 2024 budget. So it is a 1.5 year wait. I understand it's maybe a 12-month wait for the referendum, but there's additional time for those funds to actually become available. So I know that's been discussed already. This proposal here this evening is to meet a very strict timeline, and there's a lot of work that needs to be accomplished leading up to those deadlines. So for me, being financially responsible here without spending township dollars on an initiative that the full board may not be in support of at this time, that is why we're here this evening, to see if this is something we're going to move forward with for November. If not, there's certainly more tasks and education and marketing and those sorts of things that we can start to move forward with.
Yeah. There's a slide at the back end here we didn't present on the whole outreach program. The two presenters from Bethel and Bushkill, they were huge on this, as well as the financing. So a lot of this is trying to summarize, the tenets that they put down regarding an outreach program. So our committee, I imagine, we ran out of time. Right? This was the next agenda topic we would have accomplished, but we were focused on this for tonight. This is one of the items we would do next. It would apply regardless of whether you're talking November or next May.
And I would say Commissioner Walk did mention that there's a schedule float to this, or a buffer, if you will. So if this is something the board wants to sleep on, take into consideration, I think there's still an opportunity to reconsider this at a later date and still meet those deadlines. I'll just put that out there for now, but take that into consideration.
I would like to comment strategically. I still like to hear from Commissioner Hodges, but strategically, there's a good reason to have a referendum of any nature in the general election in November, and that's because you have more voters typically, statistically, coming out to express their opinion on elected officials or a referendum in this case. So in this past election, I think we got a little over 32% turnout in the primary, which is, maybe historically not a bad number, but it's only 32%. A general election, you're going to get 50% and greater this coming November than we have in primary. You're going to hear from more people, and that's what we need. We need to hear from as many people who want to voice their opinion on this topic, yes or no. So I will pause there, but getting back to this topic, I don't want staff working on things that the full board does not approve of. For the same reason, they have limited time, they need to prioritize, and if we're going to take a pause, then we're pausing.
So if I could just jump in, the work that we did with the Preservation Committee timing is actually great because we're doing resource protection with the comp plan. So all of it kind of dovetailed. I was in that mindset, and I had the data set, like the map was open. So, I created the data. And I think the important part of this is, as the committee and as staff, we were looking at the next step, and the next step is to create this ordinance. That ordinance, whether it's for November or it's for May, that ordinance work needs to get done at some point. So if the work gets done in the next 2 weeks, it can be used for the November election or the May election. And that decision doesn't need to be made tonight. It's just the decision whether to expend the resources to craft that ordinance. And that's kind of where we got to as the committee was, all right, next step is we should really come in with this ordinance. So
here's what that might look like.
Commissioner Hodges.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We're in 10 minutes.
All right, well, I just wanted to comment on the election. In November, you have the numbers, but I think in May, you have the people who are really interested and really have, they're plugged into what's going on. So I think in the May election, you have people who are perhaps more informed. That's just my feeling. I don't have a preference either way, but I think May is where you really have the people that know what's going on. I want to be respectful of people's time. I know I'm getting tired, and I didn't get a chance to review everything. I need to think about it, and I did make my comments earlier. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Thanks.
So at this point, unless there's any more public comment, everything out of the chat, Dave? Okay. Is there consensus on the board? I'm not clear, Monica, what you said.
I see no reason why there can't be further discussion on this. How I feel.
Further board discussion or?
Further board discussion,
Okay.
yeah.
Tonight?
No, not tonight.
Yeah,
No.
we've got the staff
Commissioner
member waiting.
Hodges,
No, no.
I just want to make sure.
Okay.
Sorry to be so
I want to make
emphatic,
sure I
but
understand what you're saying.
and
Are
you know
you
what?
saying
I almost wish that this in itself was a workshop topic where we had this before 6 p.m. I know the email was at 3:46 p.m., but I wish I would have been able to see it and we had that time just designated for this. I'm not saying I don't support this. I absolutely do. I ran on this.
We can,
Yeah, yeah.
we can,
But like I said before, I'll reiterate what I said. I look at Lower Mac, they've been doing it for a long time. They only went to referendum in November 11, November 21. See, I'm getting fuzzy. And I would like to know the other mechanisms by which we can preserve. It's in the voters' hands as to whether or not they want an EIT. But, you know, I would hate to do that now in this climate, this economic climate. But I think we need more discussion on this. I think it's excellent. I think you guys did a great job. I'm so grateful to you, but I need to think about it and we need to talk about it more.
I agree. It is 10 o'clock. I don't want to squelch. Obviously, we need to discuss this more. There's an awful lot of good information that's been discussed, and we do have a staff member waiting to present to us on an item. I apologize. I should have had you do that before we did this. So in the interest of time and moving our meeting along at this point, it sounds like the board is in agreement that we need more discussion. I'll certainly throw that out there we can schedule another workshop if you'd like to go that route, or
I just want to highlight one thing on the workshop, and you know, I hate to go there, but I asked for this committee to get started like 2 months before the workshop, and that wasn't allowed. If we had done that, we would have presented this information at the workshop. Instead, we've had the workshop, and now we've taken the information acquired at the workshop and we've embodied it here. So I just want to say, historically, logistically, that's what transpired.
Duly noted. Move on.
okay, moving on to agenda item C. We have Lehigh County Authority direction discussion for an interconnect agreement, and our Public Works Manager, Herb Bender, is going to present this matter to us this evening.
Good evening. The reason we're putting this on direction and discussion is LCA needs an emergency interconnect with our system to help their system. They had a 2 million gallon reservoir that has to go offline. It went on negative pressure and the steel tank just sucked in like a soda can. So it cannot go through the winter like that. It will collapse on them. So when that is taken offline in mid-July, if they need fire protection, or they can pump from their southern portion to the northern portion only on one line. So if they have a main break on that line, they cannot supply the northern section. So that's why they're looking for this interconnect. They're looking to have their reservoir back online by November. And in this interconnect, there will be what's called a pressure valve, a BERMAD valve. I have worked with Joe Zader's office on the agreement. It is set that if there is any hindrance to any of our residents or our operations, this does get turned off right away. And the pressure will be set to 40 PSI on our side, which DEP standard is 20 PSI in a residential home, I'm sorry. And then they're looking, this is just a temporary fix. We're gonna work together again after this temporary situation they need help with to actually improve both systems to make it work more cohesive together with each other. Then we have an issue up on that side that we could fix relatively very cheap, and they're more than willing to accommodate us after they get their reservoir back online also.
Where is this reservoir located? I'm not familiar with it.
It is north of Samuel Adams. It's in Upper Macungie, this reservoir.
Thank you.
So what's the downside?
The downside, they'd be in a world of hurt. If they go into a fire flow or anything, they do not have the adequate to have enough water.
I think when we heard earlier this evening from our mayor in Allentown, we all try to be good neighbors.
Yes.
I mean, you know, I think it's the right
And
thing to do.
we have, the LCA has paid for everything to date. The watering sampling of our water to mix into their system, which ultimately most of our water is LCA water. So it does work. They have a permit in DEP's hands already. DEP has gave a verbal commitment saying it's fine, order your stuff because of the delays.
I have no issues with it.
And they actually helped us on the earlier one I presented with the sewer line also.
So what do you need from us tonight as a board?
This was just to bring it in front of you. We will be coming in June with the agreement, the resolution part of it. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up that it will be coming and what it actually is. Not that we come for the resolution and you never heard about this before.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other board questions on this agenda item? Anything from the public? Okay, moving on, courtesy of the floor. One other opportunity for anyone in the public to speak. Okay, hearing and seeing none. Moving on to agenda item 14. I need a motion to authorize payment of invoices and disbursements. Second, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. There is no executive session planned for the board this evening. I will make a motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion